Welcome back to Harry's Cosmos, where every story reaches for the stars. Today's question: what if Harry and Hermione claimed the ancient throne of House Black together? If you haven't yet, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so a brand new adventure never slips past you. Now settle in and let's begin. Chapter 1: The Letter Beneath the Floor. Grimmauld Place had learned to be kind, and that was the strangest magic Harry Potter had seen it perform. For years the house had done nothing but resist. It had spat dust when swept, jammed its own drawers, kept the gaslight low and blue in the hallways so a person moving through them always looked half-drowned. Now, 2 years past the war, on a bright morning at the tail of July, sunlight came through the front hall window and lay in a warm bar across the floorboards, and the boards did not creak to move it off. Harry sat on the third stair from the bottom with a mug going cold in his hands and watched the light climb the wall an inch at a time, and let himself believe, for the length of a breath, that houses could change their minds. "You are letting your tea sit," Creature said, arriving quietly at his elbow, no complaint in it, a folded cloth over one arm. The old creature had put on a clean pillowcase hemmed with the crest of House Black stitched at the shoulder in careful silver thread. He had stitched it himself. "Master Harry does not like it cold. Creature will bring another. This one's fine," Harry said. "Sit with me a minute." Creature considered the invitation as a diplomat considers a treaty, weighing all its clauses. Then he lowered himself onto the second stair, spine very straight, hands on his knobbled knees, and together they watched the light. It was the sort of thing that would have been unthinkable a few years ago, an elf and a wizard sitting on the stairs saying nothing, and its ordinariness was the whole point. From 2 floors up came a sound Harry could have identified in his sleep, books being reshelved by someone who intended to catalog them properly this time. A thump, a pause, the scratch of a quill, the soft slide of a spine into its slot. Hermione had been in the Black Library since 7. She came out of it around noon looking like she had been arguing with the dead, which, given the portraits, she frequently had. "She has been at the Shelf of Dark Things," Creature reported, with the grave relish of a butler reporting a scandal. "The ones that bite." Creature told her the third folio takes fingers if it does not know you. She said she would introduce herself first. He shook his head and his ears swayed. "The young mistress is not afraid of the right things." "No," Harry agreed. "It's one of her best qualities and it terrifies me." He drank the cold tea to be companionable, which was a mistake, and set the mug down on the step. Upstairs, the front door of his memory still slammed on the old Grimmauld Place, the one that had held Sirius like a cell. This house was not that one. They had made it not that one on purpose, board by board, curse by curse, the way you unpicked a bad knot, patiently refusing to yank. Sirius had walked out of the Department of Mysteries alive and had walked into 2 years of hearings and stares, and finally a full pardon read aloud in a cold Wisengamot chamber, and he had come home thinner and grayer and more himself than Azkaban had left him in a decade. He had asked Harry to live here. Harry had said yes before the sentence was finished. "Creature," Harry said, "where's Sirius?" "The drawing room with the tapestry." The elf's voice changed on the last word, went careful, the way a hand goes careful near a wound that has not fully closed. "He has been standing at it since before Creature lit the fires." Harry looked up the stairwell. The drawing room door stood open, and beyond it the light was grayer, older, the light of the room that held the family tree. "Right," he said, and stood. The drawing room at Grimmauld Place was long and high and full of the smell of old wool and older secrets. Along the far wall hung the tapestry of the House of Black, a vast worked thing of dark green thread gone brown at the folds, its embroidered branches climbing from floor to ceiling, its golden names beaded in the fabric like drops of frozen honey. Here and there the cloth was scorched. Wherever a Black had married beneath the family's pride, or spoken against its politics, or simply been born without magic, some ancestor had pressed a wand to the weave and burned the offending name to a black hole ringed with singe. The tapestry was a map of the family's love, and every burn on it was a place the family had chosen its pride over one of its own. Sirius Black stood before it with his hands in the pockets of a coat too fine for a Tuesday, looking up at a scorch mark near the bottom of the tree as though it owed him money. "You're brooding," Harry said, coming to stand beside him. "Andromeda says you get a certain nostril when you brood. Andromeda married a Hufflepuff and thinks she understands suffering." Sirius did not take his eyes from the tapestry. But one corner of his mouth moved, and he tipped his head sideways until it nearly rested against Harry's, a brief press of temple to temple that said everything the joke was covering. Then he straightened. "Come here, look at this and tell me I'm imagining it, because if I'm imagining it I want to be told before your Hermione comes down and tells me for free." Harry looked where he was looking. Low on the tree off the trunk line where the main house descended in its proud unbroken column, a branch forked away to the left and ended, 3 names along, in one of the black scorched holes. The burn was old. The edges had gone brittle brown decades ago, except that they were not brown now. Around the rim of the char, a thread had come back. It was fine as a hair and unmistakably gold, and it traced the ghost of a name that had been burned away, filling in one worked letter at a time from the outside in, the way frost draws a fern on a cold window. That's not possible, Harry said very quietly. Names don't come back, that's the whole point of burning them. That is precisely the whole point of burning them, said a dry voice from the wall, and both of them turned. In a narrow gilt frame between the windows, the portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black had opened his eyes. He was a lean, sharp-featured man in the black robes of a 19th-century headmaster, and he regarded the two of them down the length of a nose that had been designed for the purpose. One burns a name to end its claim upon the house. The weave forgets it. The magic forgets it. That is law, boy, older than the ministry, older than the goblins' arithmetic. A burned name is dead to the tapestry. He looked at the returning thread of gold, and something crossed his painted face that was not quite alarm and not quite pleasure. And yet, Sirius echoed. Whose is it, Phineas? You know every stitch of that thing. You bored me half to death about it when I was 9. You were a tedious child and an ungrateful one, said Phineas Nigellus, but he leaned forward in his frame to peer, and the ghost of the interest of 100 years ago came into him. That fork is the line of my second cousin's boy, the one who was born quiet, he said, quiet the way another man might say drowned. No wand ever answered him, no letter ever came. He grew up among his sisters like a candle that would not light, and when he was 11 and it was plain, his father took a wand to the wall and put him out of the house. Marius, the name was Marius. The gold thread finished the M as he said it, curling neat and bright out of the char. Harry felt the hair rise along his arms. A squib, he said. A squib, Phineas Nigellus confirmed, and the word in his painted mouth was not cruel, only final, a stone laid on a grave. There is no coming back from it. The magic left the blood left the house. Marius Black went into the Muggle world with nothing but his mother's locket and his father's contempt, and the tapestry closed over him like water over stone. He straightened. It does not reopen. It has never once reopened, not in 900 years. Sirius looked at the thread of gold, small and stubborn and impossible, threading a dead name back into the living cloth. Then somebody had better tell the tapestry, he said, because it is reopening now. They were still standing there when Hermione came down. She came in with a folio hugged to her chest and ink on the side of her hand, and her hair pinned up with what Harry was fairly sure was a chopstick, saw the two of them frozen before the tree and slowed. What, she said, what's happened? You've both got the face. Sirius has the nostril. I do not have a nostril, said Sirius, wounded. Harry did not answer. He was watching the tapestry, and so he saw it happen, and afterward he would be glad that he had, because otherwise he would never have believed the timing. Hermione crossed the room to see what they were looking at, and as she came near the wall, as her shadow fell across the low left fork of the tree where the gold thread had just finished writing Marius, the whole line woke. It ran. Below the reborn name a second stitch of gold budded and grew, and below that a third, names Harry could not read racing down the branch in a bright quick cursive of thread, generation chasing generation toward the present, toward the floor, toward her, until the last stitch bloomed at the very hem of the ancient cloth, low enough that Hermione, without thinking, had crouched to see it. And now knelt on the drawing-room floor with her fingers an inch from her own name written in gold in the tapestry of the House of Black. Nobody spoke. The fire ticked. Somewhere below them Creature had gone very still on the stairs. Granger, Hermione read in a voice that did not sound like hers. Her fingertip hovered over the worked letters without touching them. Hermione Jean, and above it her hand rose, following the line up stitch by stitch, a genealogy in reverse. Above it my mother's name. Wendell's line, my grandmother, my great, she stopped. Her hand had reached the reborn name at the top of the fork, the one that had been burned and had come back. Marius Black, she said. It goes to Marius Black. It goes through Marius Black, Phineas Nigellus corrected from his frame, and for once there was no scorn in it at all. He was looking at the kneeling girl with the expression of a man watching a law he had staked his life on rearrange itself politely in front of him. The line did not die, child. It went quiet, 4 generations quiet, and then it spoke. He inclined his painted head a fraction, which from Phineas Nigellus Black was very nearly a bow. You are the first Black in 900 years to be born back into the weave the house tried to burn out of it. I confess I did not think I should live to fail to see it, being dead. Hermione stayed on her knees a moment longer, looking at her own name in gold. Then she sat back on her heels and turned and found Harry's eyes and held them. Whatever she needed to steady herself she seemed to find there, because when she spoke again her voice had come back to her own. All right, she said, all right. Then somebody is going to explain to me in order and with evidence how the girl whose parents run a dental practice in Hampstead is stitched into the oldest pure-blood family tree in Britain, because I have read this tapestry, Sirius. I have read every book in that library about this tapestry, and nothing I have read says this can happen. Nothing I have read says it either, Sirius said. He put out a hand and drew her to her feet and kept her hand a second past helping, which was how he touched the people he had decided were his. Which is why I think we had better stop reading and start asking the people who wrote the books. Harry looked from one of them to the other, from Sirius's gray, unreadable face to Hermione's fierce, composed one, to the gold thread still faintly warm where it lay in the dark cloth, and he thought not for the first time but with a new and specific weight that his life had a way of arriving at the impossible through the ordinary front door on a Tuesday before lunch. "The goblins," he said. "You mean the goblins." "I mean the goblins," said Sirius. "Blood law is theirs, inheritance is theirs. If a burned name is climbing back up a 900-year-old tapestry, Gringotts felt it before we did." He looked at the tree, at the returning line, at the two young people standing in front of it, and something moved behind his eyes that Harry could not name and did not ask about. "And if I know the goblins," Sirius said, "they're already writing us a letter." They were. It came that afternoon, and it did not come by owl. Harry was in the kitchen when it arrived, drying the good plates because Andromeda was bringing Teddy for supper, and Creature had declared, with the ferocity of a general defending a city, that the child would be fed off the black porcelain or off nothing. Andromeda herself came first, through the green roar of the flue, catching her balance against the mantel, and lifting a bundle of blue-swaddled indignation clear of the ash before either could touch the floor. "He hates the flue," she announced by way of greeting, and set the baby upright against her shoulder. Teddy Lupin was 14 months old and furious about travel, and his hair, which had been a mild brown when they left home, was now cycling through an outraged spectrum of reds. "He hates it, and he wants everyone to know he hates it, and he will forgive us the instant he sees the elf. Creature, where is my traitor of a grandson going to defect to?" "Creature is here," said the elf, arriving at a dignified run, and Teddy's whole small face broke open at the sight of him, and his hair went the exact silver gray of Creature's remaining wisps in a burst of toddler diplomacy. Andromeda handed him over without ceremony. Creature received him the way a man receives a decoration he does not think he has earned, and will die before he surrenders. Andromeda Tonks straightened her traveling cloak and surveyed the kitchen, and her eyes, dark, level black eyes, the same as her sister's, set in a face that had chosen a different life and paid for the choice, went from Harry to the doorway where Hermione had appeared with a book still open in her hand. "Sirius's message said the tapestry has done something it is not allowed to do," Andromeda said. "He was maddeningly vague, which means he is enjoying himself." "Someone sensible tell me before I have to ask Phineas," Hermione told her. She told it plainly and in order: the tapestry, the gold thread, the reborn name, her own name at the hem, and Andromeda listened without interrupting, one hand resting flat on the kitchen table, and by the end of it the color had gone out of her face and left the bones of it very clear. "Marius," Andromeda said softly, "Great Uncle Marius." She looked at Hermione with new eyes, and perhaps they were new in a way. "My mother used to say his name when she wanted to frighten us, the empty one, the one the magic forgot. She said it to Bellatrix, and Bellatrix laughed, and she said it to me, and she stopped. I used to lie awake wondering what happened to him, whether he was warm, whether anyone loved him out there with nothing." Her hand turned over on the table, palm up, an old habit of reaching. "And here you are, his. Loved, plainly and warm, and standing in my cousin's kitchen with a book in your hand, looking exactly like a person who has just been told something she means to get to the bottom of." "I do mean to get to the bottom of it," Hermione admitted. "Good," said Andromeda. "So do I," and whatever had gone soft in her went ordinary again, deliberately, because that was how her family bore things, and she reached out and gripped Hermione's wrist once, hard, cousin to cousin, and let go. It was into that moment that the letter came. It did not tap at a window, it rose. In the center of the kitchen table, between the good plates and the bread and the jar of Andromeda's plum preserve, the wood grain of the tabletop stirred, darkened, and pushed upward, and out of the solid oak, where the grain now moved like the surface of deep water, a single sealed envelope rose into the light and settled flat. It was made of heavy gray parchment the color of a knife. The seal was black wax stamped with a device Harry had seen before on vault keys and on old coins, crossed keys beneath a mountain, the mark of Gringotts. Below the crossed keys, pressed smaller into the wax, was a second device, a raven, wings folded, standing upon a crown that lay on its side. Harry set down the plate he was drying. Creature, across the room, had gone rigid with the baby in his arms, staring at the wax. "That," said Sirius from the doorway, who had come down without any of them hearing, "is not a normal Gringotts seal. The crossed keys, yes. The raven and the fallen crown, no. I have not seen that mark in my life, and I grew up in a house that put its crest on the soap." He came to the table and did not touch the letter. "Andromeda, have you?" Andromeda was looking at the raven and the toppled crown, and her level voice had gone quiet again. "Once," she said. "My grandfather's study, on a book he did not let us open. He told me it was the old mark, the mark of the house before the house. He said it belonged to the seat, not the family." She lifted her eyes. "I did not know what he meant. I was 8. "The seat," Sirius repeated. Something happened in his face then, some door opening onto a room he had walked past 1,000 times and never entered. He put both hands flat on the table on either side of the letter and looked at it a long moment. Then he said, "Harry, Hermione, read the direction." Harry turned the envelope. On its face, in a hand that was not any human hand, too even, too old, letters cut rather than written, was the address. It did not say Harry Potter. It did not say Hermione Granger. It said, "To the claimants of the Black Inheritance," both of them together. "Both," Hermione read over his shoulder, and her voice was very careful. "It knew there were 2 of us before we did." Goblins keep the ledgers of blood, said Sirius. If the tapestry moved, their books moved with it, and their books are not romantic about surprises. If they've written to two claimants, it is because their arithmetic says there are two. He straightened. Open it. It's addressed to you, not to me. That's rather the point of the whole thing, I suspect. Harry looked at Hermione. She looked back. Neither of them reached for it first, and then both of them did, and it was her fingers and his that broke the black wax together, and afterward Harry would remember that the seal did not crack under two hands the way it would have under one. It parted cleanly down the center, along a line that had been waiting there all along. Inside was a single sheet of the same gray parchment, and the cut, even ancient hand. To the claimants be it known that the ledgers of Gringotts, which record the blood of the ancient houses as the tides record the moon, have this day amended the account of the House of Black. A line thought extinguished is found living. A claim thought singular is found double. Where the account of an ancient house is amended in blood, the bank is bound by treaty and by older law to convene the claimants and to read to them the full estate of their inheritance, that they may know what is theirs and what is required of it. You are summoned both to the deep ledger hall of Gringotts at the hour the bank keeps and no other, 3 days hence. Come together, come informed. The inheritance of the House of Black is not what the living believe it to be, and the portion of it that has slept longest is the portion that has now stirred. A second matter, the bank is obliged to inform you that yours is not the only hand laid upon this account. A contesting claim has been entered against the reopened line. The bank takes no side in the disputes of wizards. The bank reads the ledger. The ledger will be read to all who have standing, and there is now more than one who has standing, and that is the whole of the difficulty and the whole of the reason for haste. By the hand of the deep keeper Ragnarok, high overseer of the vaults for the account of the House of Black, sovereign and dormant, Harry read it twice. Then he read the last two words a third time alone, because they had a weight the rest of the sentence did not. Sovereign and dormant, he said aloud. Sirius, what sovereign and dormant? Sirius did not answer at once. He had gone to the window, and he stood with his back to them, looking out at the grimy square where the Muggle world went about its Tuesday, and when he spoke his voice had lost all its ease. When I was a boy, he said, my mother used to say that being Lord Black was the second most important thing a Black could be. I never once asked her what the first was. You didn't ask my mother things, you survived my mother. He turned around, but I know now. I've known since the day they read my grandfather's will and named me Lord Black, and I felt nothing. No weight, no settling. I signed the papers. I got the vaults, the seat on the Wisengamot, the house, the elf, all of it. And the whole time some part of me stood there waiting for the thing that was supposed to happen when a Black became the Black, and it never happened, because I was only ever getting the second most important thing. He looked at the letter in Harry's hand. The first is the seat, not the lordship, the throne. The old sovereignty of the house that sits at Blackmore and has sat empty for longer than the ministry has existed, because, and here he stopped and looked at the two of them standing shoulder to shoulder in the lamplight with the letter open between their hands, and something in his gray face gave way to something almost like wonder, because it cannot be claimed by one. It never could. It was made by two, and it answers to two, and no Black alone has been able to wake it since the founding. Not my grandfather, not me, not anyone for 900 years. The kitchen was very quiet. Teddy, in Creature's arms, had fallen asleep against the elf's neck, his hair gone the deep steady green of the tapestry thread. Hermione was the one who put it together, because she was always the one who put it together, and Harry watched her do it, watched the moment the pieces closed in her clever mind like a lock accepting a key. 2 lines, she said slowly. It answers to 2. And the ledger has just found 2 claimants where it expected 1. She looked up. The tapestry didn't reopen my line by accident, and Gringotts didn't summon 2 claimants for tidiness. The account woke because the second claim woke, because for the first time in 900 years there are 2 heirs of 2 black lines standing in the same room. Her eyes came to Harry's and held and did not let go. It woke, she said, because of us. Harry looked back at her. He was aware of Sirius, and of Andromeda with her hand at her mouth, and of the sleeping child and the watchful elf and the whole grave weight of the house leaning in to listen. Mostly he was aware of her, of the ink on the side of her hand and the fierce clear working of her face, of the plain fact that the impossible thing the tapestry had done had a name at the bottom of it, and the name was hers, and that his own claim, the one he had never asked for, never wanted, inherited sideways through a grandmother's marriage and a godfather's love, meant nothing standing alone and everything standing beside hers. All right, he said, and his voice came out steadier than he expected. Then we go to Gringotts together, it says, 3 days. He set the letter down on the table, face up, the raven and the fallen crown catching the light. And on the way, Hermione, you're going to teach me everything the library has about a throne nobody's mentioned to me in 20 years, because I don't intend to walk into the deep ledger hall knowing less than the person contesting us. The person contesting us, Hermione repeated, and her jaw tightened not with fear, with the specific readiness Harry had seen across 100 exam tables in one war. Yes, about that. The letter says a claim has been entered against the reopened line, against my line. Somebody already knew, Harry. The thread was warm this morning. It has been alive for hours. And in those hours, before we had so much as told Andromeda, someone had already gone to Gringotts and filed to have me thrown out of a family I didn't know I belonged to. She picked up the letter and read the cold, even words again. They were fast, they were waiting, which means they've wanted this seat for longer than I've known it existed. Then they've had a head start, Harry said, and no partner. He put his hand over hers on the parchment, briefly, the way you touch a thing to be sure it's real, and let it go. Let them keep the head start, we'll keep the partner. Outside, the summer light was going gold and long across the square. Inside, at the scrubbed table in the kitchen of a house that had learned to be kind, 4 blacks and a potter and a sleeping child sat with a letter between them, and none of them yet knew the shape of what was coming, but all of them knew, in the way a family knows a storm by the change in the light, that it had already begun. Andromeda broke the silence because someone always had to, and because it was her particular gift. Well, she said, rising and reaching to take her grandson gently back from the elf who surrendered him with visible reluctance. If we are all to be summoned before the goblins in 3 days to discover we are grander than we thought, then we had better eat first, creature, the porcelain. The child will dine off the black porcelain as promised, and so will his impossible new cousin, whom the family tried to burn and failed, and who is therefore. Andromeda looked at Hermione, and the corner of her mouth moved in a way that was pure black and this once entirely warm, exactly the sort of person this house has always most needed and least deserved. Sit down, all of you, supper does not wait for destiny. They sat, creature brought the plates. The fire built itself higher without being asked, and the light of it lay warm across the good porcelain and the plum preserve and the grey letter with its raven and its fallen crown, and for a while, before the road and the goblins and the cold arithmetic of standing, there was only a family at a table, and enough. But Harry, passing the bread to the girl whose name had been written back into a 900-year-old cloth that afternoon, caught her looking at the letter where it lay face up between the plates, and saw that under her composure she was doing the thing she always did, the thing that had saved his life more than once. She was already 3 moves ahead, mapping the country they had not yet entered. And when she felt him watching and turned, the look she gave him was not the look of someone frightened by a dormant throne and an unnamed enemy. It was the look of someone who had just been handed a very difficult, very important problem, and who did not intend to solve it alone. 3 days, she said quietly, only to him, under the ordinary noise of the table. 3 days, Harry agreed, together. She held his eyes a moment longer, and then she reached over without a word and moved his cold-forgotten mug out of Teddy's grabbing range, and the ordinary courtesy of it said more than the letter had, and Harry understood, sitting there, that whatever the deep ledger hall meant to read to them, the reading had already started in a warm kitchen in gold thread. In the impossible return of a burned name to the living cloth of a family that had spent 900 years learning exactly the wrong lessons and might at last, with 2 of them standing where one had always failed, be about to learn a better one. The fire ticked, the house held its breath and for once did not resist. Long after Andromeda had gone home through the flu with a drowsing green-haired child on her shoulder, and Sirius had taken himself off to write to the family solicitor, and Creature had put the good porcelain to bed in its felt-lined case, Harry found Hermione in the library. He had known he would. The black library at the top of the house was a narrow, tall, book-choked room where the shelves ran up past the reach of any ladder, and had to be summoned down like reluctant birds, and it was where Hermione went when a problem was too large to sit still beside. She had lit the lamps low and green and pulled 3 volumes off the high dark shelf of family histories, and she sat cross-legged on the floor in the middle of them with her hair down and the chopstick abandoned, turning pages with a speed that would have alarmed a librarian and a care that would have forgiven her for it. "You should be asleep," Harry said, and sat down across from her without being asked, which was its own kind of sentence between them by now. "So should you." She did not look up. "I found it, Harry, the seat. It's in here. It's in all 3 of them, only nobody who wrote these books quite believed it, so they wrote around it, the way you write around a thing you're afraid to be caught taking seriously." She turned the volume in her lap so the lamplight fell on the page and pushed it across the floorboards to him. "Read that, the old hand, not the printed gloss underneath. The old hand is the one that knew." Harry bent over the book. The page was thick and soft with age, and the script on it was cramped and beautiful and hard to follow, the letters leaning together like people sheltering from weather, but he found the place her finger tapped and read. The first days of the house, when the family was young and the moor was wild and no crown of Britain reached so far north, there were 2 of the blood, and they were not 1 line but 2, Corvus of the elder branch, dark and unbending, and Lyra of the younger, who was said to see further than any black before her. And it is written that they did not love the same things, nor fear the same things, nor agree on the smallest matter of the house, and that this was the source of their strength and not the ruin of it. For when they came at last to raise the seat of the house, the black chair that is cut from the living heartstone of Blackmore, that is neither made nor placed but grown, And that holds the whole magic of the family as a lake holds the sky. They raised it together, hand laid over hand, blood mingled with blood, will bound to will. And the seat woke. And it has slept ever since, save when two of the blood stand before it as they stood. Not one heir but two, not one line but two lines rejoined, not power seized but power shared. For it was the making of the house that no black should ever again hold the whole of its magic alone, lest the house become only the shadow of a single will. Towger's purr, the family says, and thinks it means the purity of the blood. It does not. It means the purity of the conquered. It means always two. It means never alone. Harry read it twice. Then he sat back against the shelves and looked at her across the little island of open books and the low green light and the quiet. Always two, he said, never alone. He turned the phrase over. Sirius said no black could wake it, 900 years, and the whole time the answer was written in their own library, and they read it and they decided it meant blood. They decided it meant blood because blood was the answer they wanted, Hermione said. She had that clear, cool, cutting note in her voice that Harry had learned long ago to trust more than almost anything in the world. A house that believes its magic comes from pure blood can hoard it, and marry it into corners and burn the names that dilute it. A house that believes its magic comes from conquered, from two people, two lines, choosing to stand together and share what neither could hold alone. That house can't hoard anything. It's to give half of everything away, every generation forever, to someone it chose rather than someone it bred. She looked down at the page. So they lied to themselves for 900 years, and they told the lie so well that the seat went dark and none of them could remember why. Until the tapestry found you. Until the tapestry found me. She said it steadily, but her hand had gone flat against the floorboards, the way it did when she was holding herself very level over deep water. Harry, I need to say the frightening part out loud, because if I don't say it, I'll only think it louder. I wasn't raised to any of this. 6 weeks ago, the grandest thing about my family was that my father once removed a molar from a minor television presenter. And now a 900-year-old chair of living stone apparently requires a girl of my line to wake it, and I keep waiting for someone to come in and say there's been a clerical error. Her eyes came up to his, dark and honest in the green light. You've had the chosen one hung round your neck since you were a baby. You know what it is to be handed a size that isn't yours and told to grow into it. I don't know how you did it. I didn't do it alone, Harry said. That's the entire answer, Hermione. Every time it worked because you were there doing the half of it I couldn't. He leaned forward and put his hand flat on the open page, over the old words, over always two, never alone. I hated being the chosen one. Do you know why? Because there was only ever supposed to be one of me. That was the prophecy's whole cruelty. One boy, one enemy, no one else allowed to matter to the ending. He tapped the page once. This is the opposite. This says the size only fits if there are two people in it. It says you can't do it alone, and neither can I, and that's not the tragedy. That's the point. His mouth moved. For once, someone wrote down a job that was actually built for the way you and I already are. Hermione was quiet a moment. Then she reached out and turned the book a few degrees so the light fell differently, and Harry saw that in the margin of the old page, beside the line about power seized, someone long dead had written 3 words in a spiky, furious hand, pressed so hard the quill had torn the vellum. Some will try. Someone always tries, Hermione said softly. The contesting claim, whoever filed against my line before we'd finished breakfast. They've read this too, Harry, or they've been told it. They know the seat needs 2, and they know we're the 2 the ledger found, and they filed anyway, fast and cold, to break us apart before we ever stand in front of it. Because if they can strike out my line, prove Marius doesn't count, prove a squib's blood stays burned, then there's only one claimant again. She looked at him. And one claimant can never wake it. Which means one claimant can keep it asleep forever, and rule the house the way it's always been ruled, as the shadow of a single will, and call that winning. Harry closed the book gently, keeping his thumb in the place. Then we don't let them strike out your line. We might not get a choice. It's goblin law. It's evidence and precedent and 900 years of a family swearing on record that my great-great-grandfather stopped existing at the age of 11. Her voice did not shake, but her hand pressed harder to the floor. I could lose this on paper before I ever set foot in Blackmore. Harry looked at her a long moment in the green lamplight, the fierce, clever, tired truth of her, sitting cross-legged among the histories of a family that had tried to burn her out of itself and failed. He did not reach for a grand thing to say. Grand things were what the blacks had always reached for, and look at their tapestry, full of holes. Then we win it on paper, he said simply. You're the best researcher I've ever met, and I've met the ones who wrote half these books. They filed fast because they were afraid. People who are winning don't rush. He got to his feet and put out his hand, and she took it, and he pulled her up out of the ring of open books. 3 days, we read everything. We walk into that deep ledger hall knowing more about Marius Black than the goblins do, and we make them read your name off that tapestry out loud in gold in front of everyone. And then we go north together and we wake a chair that's been waiting 900 years for exactly the 2 of us. He did not let go of her hand at once. Deal. She looked up at him, and whatever she had been holding level over the deep water settled and steadied and became something that would carry weight. Deal, Hermione said, and then, because she was who she was, bring the second volume. There's an index of disinherited lines in the back, and I intend to know every single person who might want me dead before we meet the first one. Harry laughed quietly in the dark library at the top of the kind house and picked up the book and followed her down. And Blackmoor, far to the north on its empty moor, in a hall no living Black had walked in a lifetime, where a chair of black stone had waited 9 centuries in the dark for 2 hands instead of one, Blackmoor, though none of them were there to see it, warmed by a single degree, as if somewhere in its ancient sleeping stone it had felt the letter sent, and the answer already forming, and had begun very slowly to wake. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. The Ledgers of the Deep. There is a floor of Gringotts that the public never sees, and to reach it you do not go down in a cart. Harry had ridden the carts. Everyone who had ever held a vault had ridden the carts, screaming or silent, out along the rattling iron tracks into the goblin dark where the dragons slept and the waterfalls ran, and the deep vaults kept their gold behind doors that ate the greedy. Had assumed, when the letter said the deep ledger hall, that they would ride again. He was wrong. They came in through the great bronze doors at the appointed hour, which was not any hour a clock would name. The letter had said the hour the bank keeps and no other, and so they had asked Sirius, and Sirius had said without smiling, "You'll know it when the bank stops," and he had been right. At a moment Harry could not have marked on any watch, the enormous marble hall of Gringotts went still. The scratching quills stopped. The weighing scales froze mid-swing. The long queues of witches and wizards stood arrested between one breath and the next, patient and unseeing, held in a pause that had nothing to do with them. Only Harry and Hermione moved, and the goblin who came to meet them, and the air itself, which had gone dense and quiet with the particular hush of very old magic doing very old work. The goblin was small and precise, and dressed not in the bank's ordinary livery, but in robes of iron gray stitched with a thread of that same impossible gold. He carried no ledger, he needed none. "Claimants of the House of Black," he said. His voice was dry as the turning of a page. "I am Gornuk. I have kept the account of your house for 140 years, which is not long as the account is measured, but is long enough that I resent very much being surprised by it, and it has surprised me twice this week. You will come with me, mind the third step, it is not always there." He turned and walked toward a section of the marble wall that had no door in it, and the wall, at his approach, remembered that it had one. The stair beyond was not the goblin dark of the carts. It went down, and it went down in stone, but the stone changed as they descended, from the pale marble of the public bank to gray granite veined with black, and then to black rock veined with gray, and then to something that was not rock at all but a smooth dark glass that held in its depths a faint slow shifting light like coals seen through deep water. The walls drew close and then fell away into vaults of dark that swallowed the reach of any lamp. There were no lamps. The light came from the walls and from the veins of gold that ran through them thicker and thicker as they went, until the last flight of the stair descended through a solid seam of the metal, and Harry and Hermione walked down a staircase cut through a river of gold 900 years wide. "Don't touch the walls," Gornuk said without turning. "It is not yours yet, it may never be. The gold is discourteous to presumption." Hermione had her hand a bare inch from the wall, not to take, only to feel the warmth coming off it. She drew the hand back and folded it into the other and walked on with her chin level, and Harry, watching her, saw that she had gone into the state he thought of privately as her examination face, everything unnecessary set aside, everything necessary held ready, the whole formidable engine of her turned to the single task of missing nothing. The stair ended at a hall. The deep ledger hall of Gringotts was built for a scale that human building did not attempt. It was round and vast and domed so high that the dome was only a suggestion of deeper dark overhead, and its floor was a single disk of the black glass, and set into the black glass, filling the whole enormous round of it, was a map made of gold. Not a map of land, a map of blood. From a bright dense knot at the center, 10,000 golden lines branched and forked and ran outward across the floor to the far walls, crossing, dividing, some lines broad as rivers and some fine as threads, some running strong to the edge and some ending abruptly in a small scorched-looking break, and every line, Harry understood, looking down at the impossible glowing web beneath his boots, was a family. Every fork was a marriage, every break was a death or a burning or an ending. The deep ledger was not a book, it was the floor. The goblins had written the bloodlines of magical Britain into the bedrock in living gold, and the two of them were standing on it. "The ancient houses," said Gornuk, and there was in his dry voice for the first time something that was almost reverence and did not trouble to hide itself. "We do not keep them in books. Books burn, books lie, blood does neither. Every drop of every ancient line is written here in the deep, in the metal the mountain gives us, and the metal does not care what a wizard wishes to be true, it records what is." He walked out onto the golden web, sure-footed, and they followed, and the lines beneath them brightened faintly where they stepped, reading them, tasting them. "Come, stand upon your house and let it read you, and then we will speak of what has surprised me." He led them across the hall to a place where one of the broad golden rivers ran, thick and old and strong, from the central knot toward the eastern wall. a great dark gold artery branching 100 times, proud and unbroken down its central column. Above it, hanging in the air over the floor without any support, turning slowly, was a device of gold and black, a raven, wings folded, standing on a crown that lay upon its side. "The House of Black," said Gornuk, "sovereign and dormant. Stand upon it, claimants, one to either side of the trunk, and do not, whatever occurs, step off until the reading is done." Harry and Hermione stepped onto the golden river of the black line, one to either side of its central column, and the floor woke under them. It was not painful, it was thorough. Harry felt the gold reach up through the soles of his boots and into him, felt it move through his blood the way a hand moves through a drawer, patient, searching, turning things over to read the label. It found his mother and his father, and it went past them. Evans, it seemed to note, and set gently aside, a bright new line grafted in from outside, and then it found the older thing, the thing he had never thought about in his life, and it took hold of it and pulled it up into the light. A branch he had not known was there. A woman's name he had heard perhaps twice, at the very edge of the family tree in Sirius's study, and never thought to ask about. Above the golden river, written now in the air in letters of light, a name assembled itself, and a line beneath it running down to Harry's own, Doria Black, married out of the house to the line of Potter, and her blood carried in it, quiet but never lost, down 4 generations to the last of that line who stands here now. "You did not know," Gornuk observed, watching his face. "I knew Sirius named me his heir," Harry said. "I thought that was the whole of it, a godfather's choice. I didn't know I had the blood." "The choice matters, the blood matters more. Together they make a claim the deep cannot argue with." Gornuk's black eyes moved to the letters of light. "Your godfather's naming gives you standing in the modern law, the law of the Wisengamot and the will and the signet. Your grandmother's grandmother gives you standing in the old law, the law of the deep, which does not recognize wills and has never once been impressed by a signet. You have both. It is rare. It is very nearly clean." He turned, now the other. The gold moved to Hermione. Harry watched it happen, and he would remember it because it was one of the few genuinely beautiful things he saw underground. The golden river of the black line ran strong and proud down its central column, and where it neared the eastern wall it forked and forked again, and one of those forks, 4 generations back, ran hard into one of the small scorched breaks, a place where the line simply stopped, burned, a name ended. The deep had recorded the burning. The metal itself had gone dark and broken there, honest even about the family's cruelties. And as Hermione stood over the ledger and let it read her, the gold ran to that broken place and touched it and did not stop. It crossed the burn. Thread of new gold, fine and bright and stubborn, budded on the far side of the scorched break and ran on, out past the burning. Through 4 generations the family had sworn were nothing, down and down across the black glass to the place where Hermione's own boots stood. And there it flared and set and held, welding the broken line whole for the first time in 900 years, so that the golden river of the House of Black, which had run maimed in one branch to the wall since before the ministry existed, now ran to the wall in 2 great arteries instead of one, the old trunk and the reborn line, both alive, both bright, running side by side to the edge of the world. In the air above, in letters of light, the reading assembled itself. Marius Black, born to the house and put out of it, no wand answering him, his line believed extinguished, not extinguished. Gone into the Muggle world, and they're gone quiet, the magic sleeping in the blood 4 generations, until it woke whole and strong in the last of his line who stands here now. The second line of black is not dead, the deep never wrote it dead. The deep wrote it silent, and silence is not death, and the house was mistaken. For a long moment none of them spoke. The 2 golden rivers ran side by side to the wall, and the raven turned slowly over them on its fallen crown, and Harry looked across the reborn line at Hermione, who was looking down at the gold welded hole beneath her feet, at 4 generations of her family written back into the bedrock of the world in a metal that could not lie. "There," she said quietly, and her voice was not quite steady, and she did not pretend it was. "There it is, on the record, in the rock. Let them try to burn that." "They will try," said a new voice, and it came from above, and it was not dry like Gornuk's. It was deep and slow and old as the hall. At the center of the round hall, where the 10,000 golden lines nodded into their bright dense heart, a throne of black glass had stood empty when they entered. Harry had taken it for part of the architecture. It was not empty now. Upon it sat a goblin who made Gornuk look young, ancient beyond reckoning, his skin gone the gray of the deep stone, his eyes 2 points of that same coal light that burned in the walls, and upon his brow was a fillet of iron set with a single uncut stone. He did not rise, things came to him. "Ragnok," Gornuk said, and inclined his head very low. "High Overseer of the Vaults, Keeper of the Deep." "I have kept this ledger for 400 years, Ragnok said, and his voice moved through the floor as much as through the air so that Harry felt it in the gold beneath his boots. "In 400 years I have seen the line of black narrow and marry into its own corners and burn its bravest and cherish its cruelest, and I have watched it run 1 branch to the wall and thought, there is a house that will end. A house cannot hold a sovereign seat on 1 branch, the seat was not built for one." His coal eyes moved from Harry to Hermione and back, and there was in them a cold, precise, ancient interest that was worth more than any warmth. And now in 1 week the ledger amends itself twice. A branch thought dead runs living to the wall. A claim thought single stands double. The old law stirs in its sleep. He leaned forward a fraction. You do not know what you have woken, claimants. Sit, we will tell you. And then you will wish perhaps that you had never opened the letter, but the letter, once sent, cannot be unsent, and neither can the blood, and so we proceed. There were no chairs. As Ragnock spoke, the black glass of the floor rose in two smooth swells behind Harry and Hermione and became seats, cold and hard and exactly fitted, and there was nothing to do but sit, and Harry sat, and found the throne-shaped stone held him as though it had measured him in advance. There are two inheritances in the House of Black, Ragnock said, and the wizarding world has forgotten there were ever two. The lesser is the lordship, Vault's house seat on the Wisengamot, the elf, the signet, the name. This your godfather holds. It passes by will and by blood in the modern fashion, and it is a fine and wealthy thing, and it is not why you are here. He raised one gray hand, and above the central knot of the ledger the raven and the fallen crown turned. The greater is the seat. The onyx throne of Blackmore, the sovereignty of the house, it is not a title. It is a working, the oldest working of your family, cut into the living heartstone of the moor by the two who founded the house, and into it they poured the whole of the family's magic. The wards, the tapestry's blessing, the bond of the elves, the protections that have kept blacks alive through 900 years of their own worst instincts, all of it. The whole magic of the house sleeps in that seat and has slept because the seat cannot be woken by one. Because it was made by two, Hermione said. She had recovered herself, and her voice had the clear carrying steadiness Harry knew meant she had stopped being frightened and started working. We found it, in the library, Corvus and Lyra, 2 lines joined. It answers to a concord, not a claim. Ragnock looked at her a moment, and something in the ancient gray face shifted, the particular attention a master gives a pupil who has done the reading. The girl of the burned line has read her history, he said. Good, then I need not explain the shape of it, only the price. Yes, the onyx throne answers to the concord of 2 bloods, 2 heirs of 2 distinct lines of the house standing before the seat together, their claims joined, their wills bound, their blood mingled in the old rite. Not one, never one. The founders built it so on purpose, and the purpose was this, that no single black should ever hold the whole magic of the house alone, and so become a tyrant with 900 years of power behind a single appetite. His coal eyes glinted. They knew their own family, the founders. They built the seat to save the house from itself. And so for 9 centuries no black has held it, because for 9 centuries there was only ever one line strong enough to claim, and one is not a conquered. One is only a wish, and now there are 2 lines, Harry said. Now there are 2 lines, Ragnock agreed. For the first time since the founding, the elder in you carried quiet through the potters and named besides by the living Lord, the younger in her burned out and come back whole. 2 claims, 2 bloods standing in my hall. The deep has not seen the like since Corvus and Lyra laid the first stone. He sat back. It is, I will say plainly, the most interesting thing to happen to this account in my tenure, and I have buried 3 ministers and a dragon. Hermione leaned forward. Then it's ours, she said, by the old law, by the deep. Both claims are recorded, both bloods are written in the rock, and the seat requires exactly what we are, 2 lines joined. There's no argument. There is every argument, said Ragnock, and it is already made, and it is waiting in the hall behind you, and has been waiting with a patience I find almost admirable for the whole of this reading. Harry turned. At the edge of the golden web, where the stair came down through its river of gold, a man stood in the shadow of the great dark. He must have descended behind them. He must have stood in silence through the whole of the reading, through Doria Black and Marius and the welding of the broken line, and said nothing, and Harry did not like a man who could do that. He came forward now into the coal light, and the golden lines beneath his feet brightened as he crossed them, reading him, and Harry saw that they ran strong and old where he walked, an ancient line, unbroken. He was perhaps 40, tall, narrow, dressed in the severe good black of a man who wanted you to notice the quality without noticing the vanity. His face was a black face. Harry had seen its bones on the tapestry, on Regulus, on Sirius when Sirius was being cruel to protect himself, on the sleeping portraits of 100 dead ancestors. Gray eyes, a high pale brow, dark hair combed back without mercy. He was handsome the way a closed door is handsome, and he looked at Harry and Hermione with an interest so cold and so complete that it was almost a courtesy, the interest of a man examining 2 figures on a board he intends to clear. Perseus Black, he said, and inclined his head a precise, insulting fraction. Of the line of Cygnus, the elder branch, unburned and unbroken for 900 years. His gray eyes moved over them, over Harry's ordinary coat and Hermione's ink-stained hand and the golden reborn line still glowing under her chair, and his mouth did something that was not a smile and was meant to be seen as one. I confess I expected to be more impressed. I have contested the reopening of the second line, and I will contest the conquered, and I will hold the onyx throne of Blackmore, which is mine by every law that a serious person recognizes. I thought it only decent to say so to your faces. My family has too long done its cruelties behind tapestries. I prefer to do mine in daylight where the record is clean. There's no daylight down here, Harry said. You'll want to work on that. Something moved behind Perseus Black's gray eyes, not offense, something colder and more assessing, a man revising an estimate upward by a single grudging degree. You are quicker than your reputation, Mr. Potter. The reputation is all scar and luck and dead parents. I am pleased to find a mind. It will make this less tedious. He turned to Ragnarok and to Gornuk, and his manner changed, went formal and dry and legal, and Harry understood that the pleasantries had been the man being pleasant, and that this, the law, was the man being dangerous. High Overseer, I enter my claim and my contest on the record of the deep, that there be no confusion later. First, I am the senior surviving heir of the elder line of Black by strict primogeniture, my descent unbroken, my blood unburned. Second, I hold that a line once burned from the house is burned in law, and does not unburn because a muggle-born girl has proved able to levitate a feather. The tapestry is sentiment, the deep is law. And the deep records that Marius Black was put out of the house by the rightful act of its rightful head, and no act of a dead man can be undone by the wishing of the living. The deep records that Marius Black was put out of the house, Ragnarok agreed, and the deep records also that his blood ran on silent and has woken. Both are written, both are true. The deep does not choose between its own records. Perseus of the line of Cygnus. That is not the bank's office. That is the office of the reckoning. Harry felt Hermione go still beside him at the word. Explain the reckoning, she said. Please, all of it. Ragnarok's coal eyes turned to her, and the ancient gray face was for a moment not unkind. When two claims to an ancient seat cannot both be true, and the law of the deep and the law of the Wisengamot disagree, or are silent, the matter is not settled by judges. Judges can be bought and frightened and outlived. It is settled by the old magic itself before the seat in the presence of the house. This is the reckoning. The claimants come to Blackmore and to the Onyx throne, and each in turn makes the attempt, offers blood and will and claim to the seat, and the seat itself judges. Not a man, not a goblin, the working the founders built. It knows what it was built to answer to, and it answers, and it has never once been wrong, and it has, on the 4 occasions it was invoked in recorded history, killed 3 of the 7 who attempted it. He let that sit. The seat is not gentle to false claims. It was not built to be. A house this dangerous required a lock this cruel. 3 of 7, Harry repeated. The seat judges the claim, Ragnarok said, and it judges the claimant. Blood alone will not open it, will alone will not open it. It was built to reject the very thing your family most reliably produces, a single strong will that believes it deserves the whole. It will reject Perseus Black if he attempts it alone, and I say that not as favor to you but as fact, because a single claim is not a conquered, and the seat has spent 900 years refusing single claims, some of them far grander than his. His eyes moved to Perseus, cold and level. You know this, you have read the same histories the girl has read, you know that you cannot wake the seat alone. I know, said Perseus Black, entirely unruffled, that the seat requires 2. I have never disputed it, I dispute only which 2. And now he did smile, and it was a worse thing than his coldness had been. The old law requires a concord of 2 bloods, 2 heirs of 2 lines of the house. It does not require that the 2 be these 2. It does not require that the second blood be a resurrected squib line propped up by a schoolgirl's cleverness and a war hero's fame. There are other lines of Black, there are other heirs. He let his gray gaze rest for one deliberate moment on Hermione. A concord can be made of better blood than yours, Miss Granger, and I intend to make one. And when I bring my own 2 bloods to the seat and you bring yours, then we shall let the Onyx throne decide which concord it was built to answer to, the true elder blood of the house, or the charity case the tapestry took pity on. I am content to let the old magic judge. Are you? The hall was very quiet. Far above in the unseeable dome something shifted in the dark. Beneath their feet the 2 golden rivers ran side by side to the wall, the old trunk and the reborn line, and did not dim. Harry stood up. He did not do it in anger, though the anger was there, banked and useful, the way it had always been. He stood because a thing needed saying, and he found he could not say it sitting down. You keep calling it charity, he said, the line the tapestry took pity on. You've said it 3 times and I've counted, because Hermione taught me to count the words people repeat when they're afraid of them. He came forward a step onto the golden web, and the line of the House of Black brightened under his boots, the old trunk that ran to Doria and passed her to him, and he let it. The deep read her blood the same as it read mine, welded a 900-year burn hole in front of all of us. That's not charity, Black. That's the oldest law you claim to respect, telling you to your face that you're wrong and gold in the rock. You don't like the answer, so you're going to go find blood you like better and drag it to a chair that's going to look at it and know exactly what it is. He held the gray eyes. It's a working built to reject a single appetite. You are a single appetite wearing a second body as a glove. It'll see you. I've watched it read 3 people today. It sees everything. For a moment Perseus Black said nothing. The cold assessment was still there behind his eyes, but something else moved with it now, and it was not fear, and it was not doubt. It was the still, focused attention of a man who has just confirmed that the game is worth playing, that the opponent is real, that the clearing of the board will require actual thought. Well, he said at last, softly, how refreshing, a Gryffindor who has read the rules. He turned to Ragnarok and inclined his head. High Overseer. I have said what I came to say and entered what I came to enter. The reckoning will be invoked. I will bring my conquered to Blackmore, and they will bring theirs, and the seat will judge, and I am content. He drew a pair of black gloves from his coat and began without haste to put them on. One more matter, that the record be clean. The old law grants the challenger the naming of the day within the turning of a season. I name it now. He drew the second glove smooth over his long fingers. The autumn equinox, when the year hangs balanced between the light and the dark, as the house has always hung balanced, and as this claim now hangs. You have until the equinox, Mr. Potter, Miss Granger, to make your conquered real, or to discover, before the whole assembled house, that a burned line and a borrowed name do not a sovereignty make. He inclined his head a final precise fraction, turned, and walked back across the golden web toward the stair, and the ancient unbroken line of Cygnus brightened beneath his feet as he went, and then he was gone up into the dark, and the hall was theirs again. For a while no one spoke. Then Gornuk, who had stood through all of it with the patience of stone, cleared his throat with a sound like a small rock fall. He is not wrong about the law, the goblin said. That is the difficulty with him. He is a serious person, and the law does grant him the challenge and the naming of the day and the right to bring a conquered of his own choosing. He will bring true black blood. There are cousins on the continent, a line in the old Austrian branch, cold people but pure and willing. Two of them joined for convenience will make a conquered the law cannot dismiss. He looked up at them, and his black eyes were not without sympathy, though sympathy was not a thing goblins were built to spend freely. The deep has recorded your claim, and it is a true claim, but the seat does not judge claims only, it judges what stands before it, and on the equinox 2 conquereds will stand before the onyx throne, and only one will wake it, and the other, he stopped. The other will learn what 3 of 7 learned. I would not have you go into it thinking it a formality. It is the least formal thing in the world. Ragnarok had not moved from his black glass throne at the center of the ledger, but his coal eyes had followed the whole of it, and now they settled on the 2 young people standing over the reborn line. You have 2 months, he said. The blood is done. That part is finished, and finished well. The deep will speak for it, and I will speak for it, and no cleverness of Perseus of Cygnus will burn it out again. But blood was only ever the price of admission. The seat does not wake for blood. It wakes for conquered, for 2 bloods and 2 wills truly bound freely in the old right, so that when they stand before it, the seat reads not 2 claimants but one joined thing, indivisible, that cannot be a tyrant because it is never alone. He leaned forward, and the cold light of his eyes fell on them, and it was ancient, and it was cold, and it was, in its own fashion, almost kind. Perseus Black will bring 2 cousins joined by contract and ambition, and the seat will read the scene between them, and I do not think it will open for a joining that is only a lock and a key. He paused. The question the onyx throne will ask you on the equinox is not whether you have the blood. You have the blood. The question is whether you two are in truth one joined thing, or only friends who read the same books and won the same war and never dared to ask each other the last question. The seat will know the difference. It was built by 2 who knew the difference. Go and find out which you are, and do not lie to it, and do not lie to each other, because it will feel the lie in the rock, and the rock does not forgive. He raised one gray hand, and the seats of black glass sank back into the floor, and the reading was ended. They climbed the stair through the river of gold in silence, and it was not until they reached the pale marble of the upper bank, where the quills were scratching again and the cues had come unfrozen and the ordinary Tuesday of Gringotts had resumed as though it had never stopped, that Hermione spoke low only to him. He named the equinox, she said. The autumn equinox. That's 58 days, Harry. I counted while he was putting his gloves on. She looked up at him, and her face had that clear working steadiness, but underneath it was the other thing, the thing Ragnarok had named and set on the rock between them. 58 days to out-research a man with an unbroken 900-year line and continental cousins bred for exactly this. 58 days to prove a burned line counts. That part I know how to do. I've been doing that part my whole life. She stopped on the marble steps in the ordinary light with the ordinary crowd flowing round them and made herself say the rest. It was the last part I don't know how to do. The part where the chair asks whether we're one joined thing or 2 friends who never dared ask. Because I have never known how to ask you that, Harry. I've faced down a war more easily than I could ask you that. And now a 900-year-old rock is going to ask it for us, in front of my entire found family in 58 days, and kill us if we get the answer wrong. Harry looked at her in the marble hall in the moving crowd, with the golden dark still cold on his boots and the raven and the fallen crown burning behind his eyes. Then it's a good thing, he said, that we've never in our lives been able to lie to each other. We're going to be terrible at lying to a rock. And he put out his hand, palm up, in the middle of Gringotts, the way you offer to carry half of something too heavy for one, and after a moment she put her ink-stained hand in his, and they walked out together into the London afternoon, 58 days on the clock and the whole impossible country of it still ahead, and neither of them let go until the doors had closed behind them. They told Sirius that evening in the kitchen over the ruin of a supper creature had made too much of because worry made him cook. Harry told the shape of it and Hermione told the law of it, trading the account back and forth the way they always had, one of them catching what the other set down, and Sirius listened the whole way through without a single interruption, which was itself alarming. Sirius interrupted the weather. He sat with a glass of wine he did not drink and his elbows on the scrubbed table and his gray eyes fixed on a point somewhere between them, and when they came at last to the name Perseus Black and the line of Cygnus and the continental cousins bred cold and pure for exactly this, he set the glass down very gently, as a man sets down a thing he would rather have thrown. Cygnus, he said. Yes, I know the branch. My mother wrote to them. Christmas cards in a language of insults only the very old can read fluently. He turned the stem of the glass a quarter turn on the wood. Perseus was a boy when I was a young man, cleverest of that whole frozen brood, and the cruelty in him was the tidy kind, the kind that files paperwork. He used to correct the elves' grammar before he had them punished, so that the punishment would be for a reason and not a temper. My family produced a great many monsters, Harry. Most of them were at least hot-blooded about it. Perseus is the other sort, the sort that reads the law until the law agrees with what he already wanted. He looked up. And now he wants the seat, and he has read the law, and the law does grant him the challenge. That part is true. I wish to God it weren't. He named the equinox, Hermione said. 58 days, 58 days. Sirius drew a breath and let it out slowly, and when he spoke again his voice had changed, had put down the bitterness and picked up the other thing, the thing that had walked out of Azkaban still able to love people. Then here is what I have, for what it is worth, which after this afternoon is apparently less than either of you. I could never wake that seat. I told you that. I stood in front of it once when I was young and angry and briefly convinced I could do anything, and it looked at me. I felt it look at me in the stone in my own blood, and it found one of me, and one was not enough, and it let me go the way you let go of a thing that isn't ripe. I have carried that quietly for 20 years, the one black thing I could not do. He put his hand flat on the table, and then deliberately he reached out and laid it over Harry's and his other over Hermione's, so that the three of them were joined across the wood. I am telling you so you understand what it means to me that it read the two of you today and did not let go. Whatever it costs at the equinox, whatever that cold man brings north. You have already done the thing my family could not do for 900 years, and you did it by accident on a Tuesday because you happened to be standing next to each other. I have spent my whole life being the last of the blacks who could not fix us. His grip tightened once on both their hands and eased. Go and be the first two who can. Creature at the stove had stopped pretending to stir. Above them faintly the house had gone still in the way it did when it was listening, and for once nothing screamed in it. We'll need to go north, Hermione said into the quiet gently because someone had to steer them back to the shore of the practical and it was usually her. To Blackmore. Ragnarok said the blood is only admission. The seat waits for Concord and we can't build a Concord out of a library. We have to stand in front of the thing. We have to know what it wants. She turned her hand over under Sirius's and gripped it, cousin to cousin, the same gesture Andromeda had given her a lifetime ago that morning. Will you come? To Blackmore. Something crossed Sirius's face that had grief in it and was not only grief. No one has opened Blackmore in my lifetime. My grandfather sealed it when the seat rejected him. He called it a hall of failures and never went back. He was quiet a moment. Then the old reckless light came up in him, the one Azkaban had dimmed and never drowned. So yes, obviously, I would not miss it for the world. Andromeda will want to come. She has more right to walk into that hall than any of us, and she was made to walk in the front, not be burned off the wall by the back. He stood and gathered the glasses, and the ordinary motion put the evening back on its feet. We go north. We open the hall of failures. And we find out the two of you in a rock 900 years old, whether this family finally raised something it can be proud of. It was Creature who broke the quiet, and none of them had expected him to. He had come to the table without any of them marking it, and he stood at Sirius's elbow with the wine bottle held in both hands like a relic, and his old eyes had gone wet and very bright. Blackmore, he said, and the word came out of him rough, a word with a splinter in it. Creature's mother served at Blackmore, before the ceiling. Creature was small. Creature remembers the great hall and the black chair that no one sat in and the light that came off the walls at the turning of the year. His ears trembled. Creature's mother said the house was not always cruel. She said it went wrong when it forgot the two and remembered only the one. She said one day the two would come back and the hall would wake and the elves of Blackmore would light the lamps again. He looked from Harry to Hermione and he bowed, very low, lower than Harry had ever seen him bow to anyone living. Creature will light the lamps, the old elf said. Creature has waited his whole life to light the lamps. Master Harry and the young mistress will not walk into that hall in the dark. No one spoke for a moment. Sirius reached over and set his hand briefly on the elf's thin shoulder, and Creature permitted it, which was its own quiet history. Harry looked at Hermione across the table, over the cleared plates and the joined hands just come apart, and neither of them said anything because the day had used up all the saying in them. But she met his eyes and held them, as she had in the drawing room and again in the deep, and there passed between them without a word the whole of the agreement. North together, the equinox on the clock, and the last question waiting for them in the dark of a hall no living black had dared to open. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 Blackmore. They came to Blackmore at the failing of the light, and the hall knew them before they reached its door. There was no flue to it, no portkey the ministry had ever registered, no name on any map a Muggle surveyor had drawn. Sirius had found the way in an old ledger of his grandfather's, a single line of coordinates written in a hand that shook, and they had gone the last of the distance on foot across a moor that ran out flat and purple and endless under a sky the color of a bruise healing. The heather dragged at their boots. The wind came off the high ground with the smell of peat and cold water and something older beneath it, a mineral tang, the breath of deep stone. And then the land lifted and folded, and in the fold of it, where no hall should have stood and none was marked, Blackmore rose out of the ground as though the moor had decided at the last moment to remember it. It was not a ruin, that was the first shock. Sirius had called it a hall of failures, sealed and abandoned, and Harry had built a wreck in his mind, ivy and fallen roofs and rooks in the rafters. Blackmore was whole. It was black and vast and old past the reckoning of any other building Harry had seen, a great low mass of dark stone that did not sit on the moor so much as grow from it, its towers no taller than the hills, so that from a distance you would take it for an outcrop of the living rock, which it very nearly was. No light showed in it. Every window was a blind, dark eye. It had the stillness of a thing that has held its breath for 900 years and grown very good at it. Then Harry and Hermione, walking side by side at the head of their small company, came within a stone's throw of the great door, and Blackmore breathed out. It ran along the whole face of the hall at once, a change so total that Andromeda made a sound behind them and Sirius stopped walking. The blind windows warmed. Not with lamplight, not yet, with the deep slow shifting glow Harry had last seen in the walls of the deep ledger hall, the coal light of the family's old gold, rising in the veins of the stone until the whole vast black mass of Blackmore stood limned in it, every window a coal, the towers traced in dull fire against the darkening sky. The wind dropped. On the moor behind them the heather went still. And out of the stillness came a sound that Harry felt in his back teeth and in the soles of his feet and in the old black blood he had not known he carried until that week. A single deep note struck once somewhere far inside the hall, a bell that was not a bell, the voice of the Heartstone answering the blood that had come home. "It has never done that," Sirius said. His voice had gone to nothing. "In my life. I came here as a boy, it was cold, it was dead, it was a great black tomb, and my grandfather wept in the doorway and we left. It has never once," he stopped and stood on the moor in the coal light with his face open in a way Harry had rarely seen it. "It's waking. You're not even inside and it's waking, because there are two of you at the door." Hermione had not spoken. She stood looking up at the vast warming face of the hall, at the light rising in the stone, and her hand had found Harry's without either of them deciding it, and he felt her grip tighten as the deep note faded into the moor. When she spoke it was very quiet and only half to him. "It's not a tomb," she said. "Everyone told us it was a tomb. Sirius, the books, Ragnarok, a dead thing, a hall of failures." She shook her head slowly. "It was never dead. It was asleep and it was waiting, and it has been waiting so long that the family taught itself the waiting was death, because that was easier than hoping." Her fingers laced through his. "It knew us at the door, Harry. Nobody had to tell it, it just knew." Behind them, Andromeda Tonks walked forward through the heather to stand level with the two of them and looked up at the house that had burned her name off its wall and did not say anything at all and did not need to. They went in together. The great door of Blackmore had no handle and no lock. It had a device worked into the black wood in dull silver, the raven, wings folded, standing on the fallen crown. As Harry and Hermione came before it, the raven turned its worked head, which no worked thing should do, and regarded them out of one silver eye, and then the door drew back into the stone with a sound like a long exhalation, and warmth came out to meet them, and light. The elves had lit the lamps. They stood in a double row down the length of a hall that ran back into the hill farther than the eye could follow, small figures in clean gray cloth stitched with silver at the shoulder, each holding a lamp of that same coal gold light, and they had lit them, every one, so that the great dark throat of Blackmore blazed gently from end to end. There were dozens of them. They were the elves of Blackmore, Harry would learn, the ones who had never left, who had kept the sealed hall through 900 years of dark against the day the two came home, dusting a house no one entered, polishing a chair no one sat in, waiting with the terrible patience of their kind for a family that had forgotten they existed. At the head of the double row, Creature stood with his own lamp lifted, and he had been weeping without any shame at all, and when Harry and Hermione crossed the threshold together, the whole double row of the elves of Blackmore bowed as one, low, in a rustle of grey cloth, and one of them, very old, older even than Creature, said in a cracked high voice that carried the length of the blazing hall, "The two have come home, light the deep lamps, the two have come home." "They kept it," Hermione whispered. 900 years, nobody came, and they kept it lit inside, waiting. She looked at the rows of small, bowing figures, and her hand pressed hard against Harry's. "Oh, Harry, somebody has to tell them they didn't wait for nothing." "You just did," Harry said. "Look at them, they know." It was Andromeda who could not walk any farther. She had come 3 steps into the blazing hall behind them, and there she had stopped, and when Harry turned to see why, he found her standing very still in the cold gold light, looking not at the elves or the lamps but at the wall to her left, where a smaller tapestry hung between two of the lit sconces, older than the one at Grimmauld Place, its green gone almost to black with age. It was a working of the same family tree, the northern copy, the one the hall had kept, and low on it, on a branch that forked away toward the modern day, there was a scorch. Andromeda was looking at the scorch. She had been 8 once in a house exactly like this, and someone had pressed a wand to a wall exactly like this and burned a girl's name out of the cloth, and the girl had grown up and married her Hufflepuff and buried a daughter in a war and become the last kind black left standing, and she had never in all the years between come home. "That's mine," she said. Her voice was level because her voice was always level. Her family had beaten levelness into her the way other families beat piety. "That burn, that's where my name was. My mother did it herself at this exact wall in a house I've never set foot in, and I felt it, 150 miles away at school in the middle of Charms. I was 17. I felt the cloth close over me and I told everyone I'd cut my hand. She did not move toward it. I have spent 30 years being very sensible about that burn. And I find I cannot be sensible about it standing in front of it, so someone will have to forgive me a moment." No one told her to be sensible. Sirius went and stood at her shoulder, close, not touching, the way you stand with a person at a grave, and then the old tapestry stirred. It was the same magic they had watched at Grimmauld Place, but it ran faster here in the waking hall in the light of the roused seat below, a thread of gold budding at the rim of the char and running inward, filling the burned letters back one stroke at a time. A.N., the old name writing itself home into the cloth the family had tried to end it in. Andromeda Tonks watched her own name come back into the tapestry of the House of Black, and she put one hand up to her mouth, and she did not make a sound, and the gold ran on until the whole name stood whole and warm in the dark weave. Andromeda, restored. And beneath it, unburned now, unfurling in the same living gold, a name the family had scorched out with hers 30 years ago and would have kept scorched forever, Nymphadora, and beneath that, small and new and bright, a third, Edward, Teddy. Written into the northern tapestry of Blackmore in gold, in the hall of his ancestors, a black by the old count, welcomed home by a house that no longer had any say in the matter. "It doesn't ask permission anymore," Hermione said softly, watching. "The hall, now that it's waking, it's just putting everyone back, everyone they burned. It's undoing 900 years of it, one name at a time, and there's nothing the dead can do to stop it." "No," said Andromeda, and her hand came down from her mouth, and her voice, when it steadied, had something new under the levelness, something that had been waiting 30 years for a wall to say it to. "No, there is not." She looked at her name and her daughters and her grandsons, restored in gold in the house that had cast her out, and then she turned and looked at the 2 young people whose coming had woken the hall that was doing the restoring. "I told you this morning you were exactly the sort of person this house has always most needed and least deserved. I did not know when I said it that I meant it quite so literally." She drew a breath. "Take me down to the seat when it's time. I have a great deal to say to it, and 30 years to say it in." The portraits knew too. Blackmore was hung with them, generation on generation of the House of Black in oil and gilt, climbing the walls of the great hall and the stairs beyond it into the dark. And as Harry and Hermione walked the length of the lamplit hall, the portraits woke down the whole run of the wall, one after another, a wave of opening painted eyes, a rustle of painted robes, a murmur that ran ahead of them and behind. Some of the painted faces were cold, some turned away. But most leaned forward in their frames to look, ancient blacks in the black and silver of a dozen centuries, and the murmur that ran along the wall was, more and more as they walked, a single word passed frame to frame like a lamp being lit. Two, the two. At the head of the hall, where the lamplight gathered brightest, hung the largest frame of all, and in it, in robes of deep green worked with the raven and the crown, sat a black so old that the paint of him had gone dark with the centuries, a great boned man with a beard of iron gray and eyes that had been painted by someone who understood exactly how much whether such eyes had seen. He did not lean forward, he did not need to, the hall arranged itself around him. "Arcturus Black," Sirius murmured. "The Arbiter, my great-great-grandfather, and the last man who understood the old law before it went out of the family like a light. If any portrait in Britain knows what the seat wants, it's that one. And he is not easy, Harry. Even for a painting, he is not easy." Arcturus Black regarded the company that had come into his hall, the disgraced lord who could not wake the seat, the daughter of the house burned off its wall, the elf weeping at the door, and at the front, walking side by side and not letting go of one another's hands, a potter with black blood he'd never claimed, and a girl the family had tried to erase and failed. The painted eyes moved over all of them, slow and cold and thorough, and came to rest at last on the joined hands. "So," said Arcturus Black, and his voice was deep and dry and came out of the frame like wind out of a barrow. "The hall wakes. I confess I did not think I should see it. I have hung in this frame 900 years by the count of the house, and I have watched a great many blacks walk this floor believing themselves worthy of the seat. and I have watched the seat send every one of them away, and I had come to think the founders built a lock that no key would ever fit again. The painted eyes narrowed. And now two children walk in holding hands, and my house lights itself like a girl before a dance. Tell me then, tell me quickly, before I let myself hope, which is a thing the dead should never do. Are you the two, or are you only the latest and the cruelest of the disappointments, the ones who got close enough to wake it before it broke their hearts? We don't know yet, Hermione said. The whole hall went still. It was not the answer the portraits had expected, and it was certainly not the answer a black would have given, a black would have claimed, would have declared itself worthy in ringing tones and been sent away for exactly that. The painted eyes of Arcturus Black widened a fraction, and then slowly something moved in the ancient dark-varnished face that had not moved there in a very long time. We have the blood, Hermione went on steady, her chin level, her hand in Harry's. The deep confirmed it. 2 lines, his and mine, and the seat needs 2 lines, and we're the first 2 the families had in 900 years. That part we know. But you built a lock that judges the claimant and not just the claim, and we've been told it can tell a true conquered from a contract, and I won't stand in your hall and tell you we're certain of a thing we're only hoping is true. We think we might be the 2. We came here to find out honestly. And if we're not, if we get here to the end of it and the seat looks at us and finds we were only friends who never dared ask the last question, then I would rather it send us away than open for a lie, because a house that opens for lies is exactly the house that burned my great-great-grandfather off its wall for the crime of being born without magic. She held the painted eyes. So, no, I can't tell you quickly. But I can tell you truly, which the family stopped doing a long time ago, and maybe that's a start. For a moment Arcturus Black said nothing at all. Then the great old portrait inclined its head slowly, the way a mountain might incline if a mountain chose, and the movement ran down the whole hall of watching frames like a wind through wheat, portrait after portrait bowing its painted head to the girl the family had tried to erase. 900 years, said Arcturus Black softly, since a black stood in this hall and told me a hard truth instead of a proud lie. 900 years, child of Marius, and the one who finally does it is the one we burned. The old eyes moved to Harry and to the joined hands and back. You may be the 2, you may not. The seat will judge that and not I, but I will tell you what I have told no one, because no one who stood here ever earned the telling. The seat does not open for the worthy. That is the first lie the family told itself, and it is the lie that kept the hall dark. It does not open for the strong or the pure or the deserving. It opens for the joined. Go and see it then. Go and stand before the onyx throne, the 2 of you, and do not claim it, and do not command it, and do not do a single one of the proud, loud things your family has done in front of it for 900 years. Simply stand before it, together, and let it look at you. That is all it has ever wanted, and it is the one thing this family was never able to give it. He raised a painted hand toward the dark archway at the head of the hall, beyond the last of the lamps, where a stair went down into a deeper dark than lamplight reached. The seat is below, said Arcturus Black, in the heartstone where the founders laid it. Go down, you 2. The rest of you will wait, and that is not cruelty, it is law. The seat is shown to 2 and no more the first time. Go down, children. Your house has waited 900 years to be looked at properly. Do not keep it waiting past the turning of the light. They went down alone. The stair beyond the archway was cut from the same black glass-veined stone as the deep ledger, and it descended in a slow curve into the root of the hill, and the coal light came with them out of the walls, faint and enough. Harry counted the turns and lost count. The air grew cool and still and very clean, the way the air is clean at the bottom of a deep well, and the mineral smell of the deep stone rose around them, and the deep note he had felt at the door sounded again once, far below and very near, patient, waiting. And then the stair ended and the walls fell away, and they stood at the threshold of the heart of Blackmore, and Harry forgot, for a moment, how to breathe in the ordinary way. The chamber was round, and it was not built. That was the thing the eye kept refusing and the blood kept insisting on. No one had built this. The great domed round of it had been grown, or found, or sung out of the living rock at the root of the moor, its walls a single unbroken skin of the black glass stone, veined thick with the coal gold of the family magic, so that the whole vast chamber glowed with a light that came from everywhere and nowhere, a light the color of banked embers, of old honey, of a fire kept alive 1,000 years. And in the center of it, where all the veins of gold in all the walls ran down and gathered and poured together into the floor and up again, stood the onyx throne. It was cut from the heart stone, and it was not cut at all. It had grown there as a crystal grows, as the slow architecture of a cave grows. A chair of black stone that was also, Harry saw as his eyes learned it, a thing stranger than a chair. High-backed, broad enough for the 2 who had made it, its arms and its back worked all over with the coal gold veins that ran up out of the floor and into it and through it and pooled at its crown into the shape the whole hall wore, the raven with its folded wings standing upon the fallen crown. It was cold. Even from the threshold Harry could feel that it was cold, a deep, patient 900-year cold, the cold of a hearth that remembers fire, and it was waiting. There was no mistaking that it was waiting. The whole chamber leaned toward the empty seat the way iron leans toward a lodestone, and the deep note sounded again, nearer, gentler, and Harry understood without being told that the note was the seat itself, and that it had been sounding that single patient call into the dark for 900 years, and that they were the first in all that time to come down the stair and hear it. Oh, Hermione breathed. It was not a word. It was the sound a person makes when the size of a thing arrives all at once. Oh, Harry. Look at it, it's the whole house in there. Ragnar said the whole magic of the family sleeps in the seat, and I thought I understood, but I didn't understand at all until she stopped. Her hand had gone tight in his. It's grieving, she said very softly. Can you feel it? It's not angry. Everyone made it sound so cruel, 3 of 7, the lock that kills, but standing here it isn't cruel at all, it's lonely. It's been alone down here in the dark for 900 years, holding the whole heart of a family that forgot it existed, and it is so unbearably glad that someone finally came. Harry could feel it. That was the thing he would never be able to explain to anyone who had not stood where he stood. He could feel the seat in the old blood, the blood of Doria Black he'd carried his whole life and never known, and Hermione was right. It was not cruel, and it was not proud, and it was not a lock that killed. It was a heart, a great, cold, patient, grieving heart at the root of a hill, that had been built by 2 people who loved each other enough to make sure no one who came after could ever hold it alone, and that had waited, faithful past all reason, for 2 more who could. Arcturus said not to claim it, Harry said. His own voice had gone rough. Not to command it, just to stand in front of it, together. Then let's stand in front of it, Hermione said, together. They walked out across the round of the chamber, over the floor where all the gold of Blackmore gathered and poured, and they came to the foot of the onyx throne hand in hand, and they stopped, and they did not claim it, and they did not command it, and they did not do a single proud loud thing. They simply stood before it, the 2 of them, shoulder to shoulder, and let it look at them. And the seat woke. It did not blaze, it did not roar. Later, when people asked, and people would ask for the rest of their lives, Harry would say that the largest thing that ever happened to him happened quietly. A warmth came up out of the cold stone, slow, tentative, the warmth of a hand reaching out to be sure it is not dreaming. The cold gold veins in the arms of the throne brightened, softly, from ember to true gold, and the light of it ran up the high back and gathered at the crown in the raven in the fallen crown, and the raven of dull silver turned to living gold and lifted its worked head and looked at the 2 of them standing at the foot of the seat, and the fallen crown beneath its feet stirred, and turned, and slowly, slowly, as if remembering how, began to right itself. And the deep note that had sounded alone in the dark for 900 years sounded again, but it was not alone this time. A second note rose to meet it, out of the walls, out of the gold, out of the blood in Harry's veins, and he knew without looking, the blood in Hermione's. A second voice twining round the first, and the 2 notes together made a chord that filled the whole grown chamber of the heart of Blackmore. A chord no one had heard since Corvus and Lyra stood where they were standing, and it was the sound of a house remembering that it had always, always been meant to be 2. Then Hermione stepped forward just slightly, and her hand slipped from his, and the moment she was no longer beside him the light in the throne dimmed, not out, but down at once, the cord thinning back toward the single grieving note. She stepped back to his side and took his hand again, and the light came up, the cord swelled whole. She did it once more, gentle, testing, a scientist to the last even here, and the throne answered every time, bright with the 2 of them and dim with the one, honest as gold, and when she took his hand the final time and the cord rose full and golden through the chamber, she was no longer testing anything. It's true, she said. Her voice was not steady, and she did not try to make it so. Everything the library said, everything Ragnar said. It's true, Harry, it's all true. It needs 2, it dims for 1 and it wakes for 2, and it's us. It brightens for us, not for a black and a black, for you and me. She turned to look at him in the gold light of the waking throne, with the impossible cord ringing in the stone all around them, and whatever careful level thing she had kept over the deep water since the tapestry first moved, she let it go. I keep waiting to be told I don't belong here, my whole life. Top of every class, and I still waited for someone to come and say there'd been a mistake, that a girl like me couldn't really, and the family that owns this place literally burned my name off their wall for exactly that. And I walked down a stair into the root of a hill, and a 900-year-old throne looks at me, and it doesn't dim. It brightens. It's been waiting for me. It's been waiting for us. Harry looked at her in the golden light. He did not reach for a grand thing to say, because grand things were what the blacks reached for, and grand things had kept this chamber dark for 900 years. He reached for the true thing instead. I've never once in 10 years thought you didn't belong somewhere, he said. You belong so hard that rooms rearrange themselves around it. I've watched it happen since we were 11. The only person who ever doubted whether Hermione Granger belonged was Hermione Granger. He tightened his hand on hers, and the cord swelled a fraction brighter, honest as ever. The throne agrees with me, by the way. Look at it. You keep saying it's been waiting for us. It's been waiting for you. I'm the one it's had a claim on for 900 years through some grandmother I never met. You had to go and burn out of itself and grow back on purpose. Out of everyone the house ever produced, Hermione, you are the one it went to the most trouble to get back. His mouth moved. So the next time some part of you waits for someone to say there's been a mistake, remember there's a hill in the north with a heart of gold that grew you a whole line back from ash to have you, and me holding your hand at the bottom of it, agreeing with the hill. For a long moment she only looked at him. The cord rang softly in the golden dark. The raven turned its head, and the crown beneath it, half righted now, held its careful new angle, waiting, the way the whole house had learned to wait. And then Hermione did something she had not done in 10 years of standing at his side through every impossible thing. She stepped in and put her arms around him, and held on in the heart of Blackmore, in the light of the seat that had grown her a line back from ash to have her, and Harry held her back in the gold and the deep note in the ringing cord, and neither of them said the last question out loud, because the throne, brightening steadily around them to a warmth that had not touched these stones in 900 years, was already quietly beginning to answer it for them. They did not hear the footsteps on the stair above. By the time they came back up into the lamplit hall, hands still joined and the gold of the deep chamber still on them like sun on a swimmer, the company at the head of the hall had grown by two, and the temperature of the room had changed. A woman stood among the portraits in traveling black of a cut so fine it made Perseus Black's severity look like a costume. She was tall and pale and beautiful in the cold exact way of her family, fair where her sisters were dark, and she had Andromeda's bones and Bellatrix's carriage and eyes that were entirely her own, gray and quick, and reading the whole hall at a glance, the lamps, the bowing elves, the two young people coming up from the deep with light still on them. Beside her stood a young man Harry's own age, fair-haired, sharp-faced, holding himself very straight, his eyes moving between the elves and the portraits and the joined hands with a wariness that had learned itself in a hard school. Narcissa, Sirius said, and there was a whole complicated history in the two syllables. And Draco, you came. You sealed a summons in the old wax, cousin, and sent it to the family register, said Narcissa Malfoy, and her voice was cool and precise and beautiful and gave away not one single thing. The old wax has not been used in my lifetime. It compels attendance of the blood. I could no more not come than the tide could not turn. Her gray eyes moved to Harry and Hermione over the joined hands, over the gold still lingering on them, and something flickered behind them, quick and cold and calculating, a woman doing sums at speed. So, it is true then, the rumor that reached me in 3 separate letters before I had finished my breakfast. The hall has woken, the seat has stirred. And it stirred, the gray eyes moved deliberately to Hermione, and the temperature of the room dropped another degree. For a resurrected squib-line and a half-blood with a scar, my mother would have burned the wallpaper. Your mother tried to burn Andromeda, Sirius said. It didn't take then either. We're a difficult family to erase, Sissy, you may have noticed. Narcissa Malfoy did not rise to it. She looked at Andromeda, at the sister she had not stood in a room with in more years than Harry could count, and for the space of a breath something crossed the cold, beautiful face that was not calculation. Then she put it away, as her whole family put things away, and turned back to Harry and Hermione, and when she spoke again her voice was silk over steel. I have not come to embrace anyone, she said. Let us be clear about that at the outset, so that no one is disappointed. I have come because the old wax compelled me, and because I keep myself informed, and because what I know, I suspect, is worth a very great deal more to the two of you than my affection would be, and I have always preferred to trade in things of value. Her gray eyes moved between them, quick and level. You have woken the hall, congratulations. It is the easiest part, and you have already done it, and it has told you nothing about how to survive the equinox. Because Perseus Black came to see me 3 days ago before he went to Gringotts. He sat in my drawing room and drank my tea and told me exactly what he intends to do to you, and I have spent 3 days deciding whether to tell you. She let the silence stretch, cold and exact, the whole hall of watching portraits leaning in. I have decided. Sit down, all of you, the two of you especially. You have woken a throne today, and that is very pretty, and it will not save you, and if you want to live to the turning of the light, you are going to need to know precisely what is coming north to meet you, and I am, as it happens, the only person in Britain who can tell you. The elves brought chairs and a low table and tea in a service so old the silver had gone nearly black, and they sat, the whole strange company of them, in the lamplight at the head of the waking hall, 2 young sovereigns with the gold of the deep still on them, a pardoned lord, a daughter restored to a wall an hour ago, and the 2 cold Malfoys who had come because the old wax compelled them. Narcissa did not touch her tea. She sat very straight with her gloved hands folded, and she talked, and the hall listened, and the portraits leaned in to hear their own family's ruin planned in a beautiful cold voice. Perseus intends to win 3 times, she said, because he is thorough, and because he has learned, as I have, that a single victory can always be appealed and 3 cannot. First he will win on paper. He has filed to strike your line, Miss Granger, and he does not expect to succeed, and he does not care, because the filing is not meant to succeed. It is meant to force a hearing at the Wisengamot before the equinox, a public hearing on the standing of a resurrected squib line in front of the whole assembled traditionalist bloc, with Cassius Selwyn in the chair. Her gray eyes moved to Hermione, level and exact. You will be made to prove in that chamber that you are a black. Not to a goblin who reads gold in the rock, to a room full of men who burned their own cousins off the wall and enjoyed it, and who would rather see the oldest throne in Britain stay dark forever than watch it wake for you. He does not need them to rule against you. He needs them to sit in judgment of you at all in public, so that when the seat is contested, every witch and wizard in the country already thinks of your claim as the one that had to be argued. Let them argue it, Hermione said. I've read more black family law in a week than Selwyn's read in his life, I'll argue back. I am sure you will, and beautifully, and it will change nothing because it is not a court, it is a stage. Narcissa did not raise her voice. She never once raised her voice. It was the most alarming thing about her. That is the first victory. The second is blood. He has two of the Austrian cousins, Corvinus and Ludmilla Black of the old Vienna branch, first cousins to each other, and before you make the face you are both making, yes, the branch has kept itself that pure by exactly the means you are imagining, and they are as cold as the grave and twice as patient. He has offered them the seat's protection and the seat's wealth in exchange for a marriage of convenience and a joint claim. They have accepted. They will stand at the equinox as is conquered, two true black bloods, unburned, unbroken, formally joined. The law cannot dismiss them. The deep will read them as valid, and they feel nothing for one another at all, which Perseus believes is irrelevant, in which the gray eyes flicked just once to the joined hands the two of them had not thought to unclasp. I am beginning to suspect is the entire game, though he does not know it yet, and I would very much prefer you did not tell him. Harry watched her. You think their conquered fails, he said slowly. You think two people who feel nothing can't wake it, no matter how pure the blood. I think, said Narcissa Malfoy with great precision, that I have read the same histories as Perseus, and I have drawn the opposite conclusion, and one of us is going to be very badly wrong at the equinox. He read the founding and saw a rule about blood. I read it and saw marriage, a real one, two people who loved each other enough to build a lock that would only ever open for love. He's bringing a contract to a door that opens for the thing a contract is designed to avoid. And if I am right, then his conquered will fail, and he knows there is a chance I am right, which is why he will not rely on it. Her voice dropped, and the whole hall seemed to draw closer to hear the third thing. That is why there is a third victory, and it is the one that frightens me, and I do not frighten. If the paper fails and the blood fails, Perseus has told me he will not walk away. He has been to the vaults of the Vienna branch. He has read things the deep does not hold, older things, the workings the founders sealed away because they were too dangerous even for this family. He is looking for a way to take the seat by force, to force the old magic to open for a claim it would refuse, the way you force any lock that will not turn with a key. I do not know if such a way exists. I know that a man like Perseus does not tell you he is looking for a weapon unless he has begun to believe he will find one. She sat back. So, 3 victories, paper, blood, and force. You have 57 days and a throne that likes you and a family that has never once in its history managed to protect its own. I suggest you do better than your ancestors. It should not be difficult. The bar is on the floor. For a moment no one spoke. The lamps burned. Below them, faint and patient, the deep note sounded once through the stone. It was Draco who broke the silence, and it surprised everyone, most of all himself. He had said nothing since he entered, standing stiff and wary at his mother's shoulder, a young man who had spent his whole life on the wrong side of a war and had not yet found the shape of the right one. The Austrian cousins, he said, not quite looking at anyone, Corvinus and Ludmilla, I met them once, at a wedding when I was 9. He turned his glass in his fingers, a family gesture surfacing in a young man who would have hated to be told he had it. They frightened me more than the Dark Lord did later. He at least wanted things. They didn't seem to want anything at all. They just looked at you and worked out what you were worth. He looked up, and his pale, sharp face was not cold, only tired and honest in a way it had learned the hard way. If a chair really can tell the difference between people who love each other and people who are only useful to each other, then I hope to God you're the two it thinks you are. Because I have spent time with the alternative, and I would not wish that house on anyone. Narcissa looked at her son a moment, and something moved behind her gray eyes that she did not put away quickly enough, and then she reached over and set her gloved hand briefly over his, which was, from Narcissa Malfoy, very nearly a speech. 57 days, said Sirius quietly into the lamplit hush. Paper, blood, and force. His gray eyes came to rest on Harry and Hermione, still hand in hand in the cold gold light, the gold of the deep chamber not yet faded from them. This family has never once protected its own, so the rest of us are going to keep you two alive long enough to sit in that chair. The disgraced ones and the burned ones and the ones who picked the wrong side and came back, the whole difficult lot of us for once on the same side of the wall. He lifted the black old teacup like a glass. To the two who came home and to the equinox. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. The reckoning writ Hermione prepared for the hearing as she had once prepared for war, which is to say completely and out loud at 5:30 in the morning to a room that was mostly still asleep. Standing, she said, pacing the length of the Blackmore library with a stack of parchment in one hand and a quill behind her ear. The whole thing turns on standing. Selwyn doesn't have to prove I'm not a black. He only has to keep the question open long enough that the Wisengamot decides my claim is the kind of claim that needs deciding. That's the trap. If they vote that my standing is even arguable, then at the equinox I'm the contested heir and Perseus is the natural one, and the whole country watches the throne through that frame. She stopped and turned and pointed the quill at Harry, who was sitting on the arm of a chair with 2 cups of tea going cold, because he had learned long ago not to interrupt this particular engine while it was running. So we don't defend, we attack. We don't ask them to accept my standing. We make it impossible for them to question it without questioning goblin law itself, and there's not a pureblood in that chamber who will stand up in public and tell Gringotts its ledgers are wrong. They owe the goblins too much gold to insult their arithmetic. You've been up all night, Harry observed. I've been up all night correctly, Hermione said, and took the nearer cup of tea and drank it cold without appearing to notice, which was how he knew she was ready. Here's the shape of it. 3 pillars. 1. The deep ledger is recognized in wizarding law under the Gringotts Concordat of 1865 as the authoritative record of ancient blood, superior to any tapestry, will, or family register. Selwyn's whole case rests on the tapestry burning being legally final, and the Concordat says the tapestry is sentiment and the deep is law. His own centuries purebloods signed that treaty because they wanted the goblins to keep lending. 2. There is precedent. The line of Gaunt was ruled extinct in 1926 and unruled in 1927 when a ministry clerk turned out to descend from a disowned daughter, and nobody burned him back out because the ministry had already spent his vault. If a Gaunt can come back for money, a black can come back for a throne. 3. She looked up and her voice changed, went quieter and harder. 3 is you, and I hate using you, and I'm going to do it anyway because it works. Half that chamber owes their freedom to the war you ended. When they look at me, they see a question. When they look at me standing next to you, they see the question they'd have to answer to your face. It's not fair and it's not law and it will move 6 votes and we need 4. Harry was quiet a moment. Use me, he said. That's what I'm for. You do the law. I'll be the thing they don't want to explain themselves to. He stood and gathered the cold cups. But Hermione. When you're up there in front of Selwyn and all of them and they're making you prove you belong in your own family, I need you to remember that you already won this part. The rock read you. Gold in the ground doesn't lie and doesn't care what Selwyn thinks. Whatever they do to you in that chamber, it's theater. You're arguing about a fact that's already settled 1,000 feet under Scotland. He carried the cups toward the door. Now come and eat something before you argue a case on a stomach full of cold tea. Creature's made enough for a regiment because he's decided the hearing is a battle, and honestly, he's not wrong. They ate in the great kitchen with the family gathered, because word had gone round the house and no one would let them go south alone. Sirius drilled Hermione on the older statutes over the eggs, playing Selwyn's part with a cruelty that was its own kind of love, throwing every ugly argument the traditionalists might throw so that none of them would land fresh in the chamber. Andromeda pinned Harry's collar straight with the brisk attention of a woman who had sent a daughter into a war and learned to say what mattered with her hands instead of her voice. And when it was time, Creature came to the door with a small parcel of bread and salt wrapped in a cloth stitched with the raven and the crown, and pressed it into Hermione's grip without explanation. Bread and salt of the house, the old elf said gruffly, so it goes with you into the far room. So they know when they look at you that Blackmore stands behind the young mistress even in a chamber it cannot enter. He would not meet her eyes, the giving had cost him something. Creature will keep the lamps lit until you are home. Hermione crouched and closed the parcel in both hands and thanked him properly, the way one thanks a person and not a servant, and the old elf bowed very low and turned quickly away so that no one would see his face. Then they stepped into the green fire together, the bread and salt of the house warm in Hermione's pocket, and went down to be judged. The Wisengamot chamber had not changed since Harry had last stood in it, and standing in it again put a cold hand on the back of his neck that had nothing to do with the case. It was the same deep amphitheater of dark stone, the same tiers of plum-robed witches and wizards rising into shadow, the same sense of being at the bottom of a well looking up at everyone who had ever judged him. But the chair at the center of the high bench was not Kingsley's today. Kingsley Shacklebolt sat to one side, Minister for Magic, his dark face carefully neutral, because the standing of an ancient house was not a matter for the minister. It was a matter for the Wisengamot's own ancient committee, and the chair of that committee today was Cassius Selwyn. He was old and upright and beautifully turned out, with a mane of silver hair and a face that had spent 70 years learning to look reasonable. He was not a shouter. Harry had braced for a shouter and got instead a courteous man with kind eyes and a voice like warm oil, which was worse, because a shouter you could dismiss and a reasonable man you had to answer. "We are not here," Selwyn began when the chamber had settled, "to persecute a young woman. I want that understood at the outset because I know how these things are reported." His kind eyes moved to the press gallery where quills hovered. "Miss Granger is by every account a person of exceptional gifts, a heroine of the late war and entirely welcome in our world. Nothing I say today diminishes that, but this committee has a narrow and unglamorous duty. When a claim is entered to one of the sacred houses, and there is no house more sacred, more ancient, or more perilous than black, we must ask whether the claim is sound, not whether the claimant is admirable, whether the claim is sound. And a claim that rests upon the reappearance of a line burned from the family 4 generations ago is, whatever else it may be, a novel claim. Novel claims require examination. That is all we do here, we examine. He folded his hands. Miss Granger, you say you are a black. The family says on its own tapestry in its own hand that your ancestor ceased to be one. Help this committee understand why we should believe you over them. It was, Harry understood, a beautifully laid trap. It put Hermione in the position of the accuser asking to be believed, arguing against a family's own record. It was designed to make her plead. Hermione did not plead. She rose, and she did not go to the low stone chair set out for petitioners. She remained standing at the rail, straight-backed, a single sheet of parchment in her hand that she did not look at, and when she spoke her voice carried up the tears clear and even and entirely without heat. Chairman Selwyn, with respect, you have asked the wrong question, and I think you know it, and I think that's rather the point. A stir ran through the plum robes. You've asked me to explain why you should believe me over the family. But this committee doesn't take its facts from families. Families lie. Families burned their own children for being born without magic and stitched the lie into cloth and called it a record. This committee takes its facts in matters of ancient blood from exactly one authority, and it has done so by treaty for 161 years. She let the number sit. The Gringotts Concordat of 1865, signed by the Wisengamot of the day, ratified by the Sacred 28, still in force this morning. Article 4. In any dispute touching the blood of an ancient house, the ledgers of the deep shall be conclusive, and shall supersede all tapestries, registers, wills, and family testimony whatsoever. Conclusive, supersede. The words are not mine, they are your predecessors, and they wrote them because they wanted the goblins to keep lending gold to pure-blood estates, and the goblins would not lend against a record that a family could edit with a lit wand. She looked up at him. So the question is not whether you believe me over the family. The family's record was superseded by law before either of us was born. The question is whether this committee believes the deep ledger of Gringotts, and I have here, she raised the parchment at last, the certified reading of that ledger sealed by Ragnock, High Overseer of the Vaults, entered 3 days ago, recording that the line of Marius Black ran living and unbroken to me. In gold, in the rock, conclusive, superseding. She set the parchment on the rail. Does the committee wish to overturn the Concordat this morning, Chairman? Because that is the only way to question my standing, and I don't think the vaults of the people in this chamber could survive telling Gringotts its ledgers are sentiment. The silence in the Wisengamot chamber had a texture. Harry watched it settle over the plum-robed tiers, watched old witches and wizards do the arithmetic Hermione had handed them and arrive, one after another, at the same place, that to strike her down they would have to insult the bank that held their gold in public on the record in front of the press. Selwyn's kind face did not change, but something behind his eyes recalculated. The Concordat, he said smoothly, governs disputes of blood. No one disputes Miss Granger's blood. The deep says she descends from Marius Black, and the committee accepts it without reservation. The dispute is one of law, not blood. Blood is descent, standing is inheritance, and a line lawfully disowned may carry the blood forward and yet carry no inheritance, no claim, no standing. The blood of a disowned son is real blood and inherits nothing, as any solicitor will tell you. Marius Black was disowned by the lawful act of the lawful head of his house. The deep records his blood. It does not and cannot undo his disinheritance. That was an act of law, not of blood, and it stands. It was a good answer. Harry saw Hermione register that it was a good answer, saw her recalibrate in real time, and he loved watching her do it almost more than he could bear. This business of 2 clever cold people fencing over the shape of a 900-year-old wound. Then let's talk about the act of law, Hermione said. Because you're right, Chairman, disinheritance is an act of law, and acts of law have requirements, and I've read the requirement, and Marius Black's disinheritance failed to meet it. She turned a page she did not need to turn. The disowning of a member of an ancient house, under the family's own charter, which is lodged with this committee and which I have read in full, requires the act to be performed by the head of the house and witnessed and recorded in the family's magical instrument, the tapestry, with intent, and requires one thing more. It requires that the disowned be, at law, disownable. And there is a single class of person that the Black Charter, in its own words, in the founder's own hand, declares may never be disowned, never burned, never put out of the house by any head however enraged. She looked up. Do you know the class, Chairman? I think you might. I think it's why your case has been so very careful never to name what Marius Black actually was. Selwyn's courteous face had gone still. He was a squib, Hermione said into the silence, and her voice did not rise, and it did not need to. Born without magic to a magical house. The Black Charter, written by the same two founders who built the throne everyone in this chamber is really hereabout, says, and I quote, that no child of the blood who is born without magic shall be cast out, for they are the houses to keep and not the houses to discard, and the head who burns a squib from the weave commits not a lawful disowning but a private cruelty, void in law of no effect upon the line. She set the page down. The founders wrote that 900 years ago. They knew their family. They knew exactly what kind of head would one day want to burn a magicless child off the wall out of shame, and they made it specifically in advance illegal. Marius Black's father broke the charter of his own house when he burned his son. The burning was void. It was void the day it happened, and it has been void for 4 generations, and the tapestry which cannot lie, only be overruled by cruelty, knew it, and the moment my magic proved the line alive, it corrected the record itself and wrote us back. The disinheritance you're relying on, Chairman, never legally occurred. She lifted her chin. So there is no act of law for the deep to leave standing. There is only a crime the family committed against a child, and a charter that forbade it, and a line that was never lawfully outside the house at all. I don't need the committee to reinstate me. I need the committee to notice that in law I was never gone. For a long moment no one in the whole deep amphitheater said anything at all. Then from the tears an old witch Harry did not know, small, sharp, with a face like a walnut in the plum robes of 50 years' service, began slowly to laugh, a dry delighted cackle that rang up into the shadows. The founder's own charter, she wheezed to know one and everyone. Oh, that is very good, that is beautiful. The child has caught the whole house in its own founding document. Cassius, she has caught you in a charter your own side wrote. I've waited 40 years to see it done. And she rapped her wand on the bench in the old sign of assent, and the sound of it was picked up here and there, and then more than here and there, plum-robed witches and wizards rapping wands on stone in a growing wooden rain of agreement. And Harry watched the vote turn in real time. Watched a chamber that had come to examine a novel claim decide instead that it had just watched something rare and clean. A young woman defend her right to exist with the enemy's own law and win. Selwyn let the sound run its course. He was too old and too able to fight a room. When it quieted, he inclined his silver head, courteous to the last, and something cold and patient looked out of his kind eyes at Hermione, marking her, filing away what she was. The committee, he said, is persuaded that Miss Granger's standing is sound at law. Let the record show it. Her claim to the second line of black is recognized. He paused. I congratulate you, Miss Granger. That was very ably done. I have sat on this committee for 30 years, and I do not believe I have been beaten quite so thoroughly, quite so young. His courtesy did not waver, and that was the frightening thing. You will understand that recognizing your standing is not the same as awarding you the seat. That question is not ours. That question, as you and I both know, belongs to older law than this chamber keeps. And I believe there is a gentleman present who wishes to invoke it. Perseus Black rose from the petitioner's gallery, where he had sat through the whole hearing without a flicker, and Harry understood that the entire contest over Hermione's standing had been, to Perseus, a thing to be gotten out of the way, a preliminary he had never much cared about winning. I thank the committee, Perseus said, and I will not detain it. Miss Granger's standing is sound. Good, I am glad of it. His gray eyes moved to Hermione, and there was something in them that was almost approval. The appreciation of a duelist for a clean strike that has changed nothing about the outcome of the duel. I would not wish to take the onyx throne from a claimant with no standing. There is no honor in defeating the unqualified. I wish my rival's claim to be as strong as law can make it, so that when the old magic sets it aside there can be no whisper afterward that she was cheated of anything but the truth. He turned to the bench. Under the ancient right of the house, which this committee has no power to grant or deny but only to witness, I invoke the reckoning. 2 Concords will stand before the seat of Blackmore at the autumn equinox. Mine of the elder unbroken line I name my Concord now, for the record, Corvinus and Ludmilla Black of the Vienna branch, joined by contract of marriage, their blood pure and their descent unquestioned, and theirs. His gaze rested one cool moment on Harry and Hermione. The seat will judge which Concord it was built to answer to. I ask the committee only to witness that the challenge is lawfully made, the day lawfully named, and both claims lawfully sound, so that whatever the old magic decides, it decides cleanly. He inclined his head. I am content to be judged by my ancestors' own working. I wonder whether my rivals can say the same. We can, Harry said. He had not planned to speak. It was not his hearing and not his law, but he was on his feet before he had decided to be, and the whole chamber turned to him, the war hero, the thing they did not want to explain themselves to, and he found he had something to say after all. You keep offering to be judged by the old magic like it's a card you're holding, Harry said. Corvinus and Ludmilla Black joined by contract of marriage. You said it like it settles something. 2 pure bloods, married on paper, standing in front of a chair built by 2 people who loved each other enough to make sure no one could ever hold this family alone. He looked at Perseus across the deep stone chamber. I've stood in front of that chair, have you? Because I have, and it's not a card, and it's not a rule about blood. It's a heart the size of a hall, and it's been alone in the dark for 900 years, and the one thing it wants, the only thing, is to not be alone anymore. You're going to bring it to people who have agreed to stop being alone in exchange for gold, and you're going to be so surprised when it knows the difference." Harry sat back down. "That's all. Witness whatever you like. We'll see you at the equinox." Perseus Black looked at him for a moment, and the cold approval was still there, and under it something else that had not been there in the deep, a first faint thread of doubt in a man who was not used to it, and did not enjoy it, and would go home and read older, darker books because of it. Then he inclined his head, precise as always, and the hearing was over. They did not get out of the ministry quickly. That was the first sign of what the hearing had actually done. In the corridor outside the chamber, where an hour before no one would have caught their eye, plum-robed witches and wizards found reasons to be near them. An elderly wizard who had voted with Selwyn for 30 years stopped to say gruffly that his own grandmother had been a Prewett, and he'd always thought the burning of squibs a barbarism, and walked off before Hermione could answer. Two younger members introduced themselves and did not let go of Harry's hand for a beat too long. The press pressed. And through the middle of it came the small, walnut-faced witch who had laughed in the tears, moving through the crowd with the total unconcern of a woman who has outlived everyone she was ever afraid of. "Griselda Marchbanks," she announced, seizing Hermione's hand in both of her dry ones. "I examined children in their NEWTS, and I have examined a great many, and you, girl, are the first I've ever wanted to examine the whole Wisengamot in front of. That chart or argument, the founder's own clause. Do you know how many pureblood boys have sat where you sat and pleaded their bloodline and lost? And you did not plead once. You prosecuted them with their own founding document." She cackled. "Cassius has not been beaten in that chamber in living memory. He'll not forgive it, so mind yourself. But there are more of us than you think who have waited a long time to watch someone do to that room precisely what you did. When it comes to the vote that matters, and there will be one girl, there's always one, you will find you are not as alone in there as Selwyn would like you to believe." She patted Hermione's hand once hard, and was gone into the crowd before either of them could thank her. Kingsley Shacklebolt found them last, and drew them into a side anteroom with a look, and shut the door, and the noise of the corridor cut off. "That," he said, "was the best afternoon this building has given me since I took the job, and I am not allowed to say so, so I am saying it once quietly, and then I am the minister again." He looked tired in the way that power made people tired. "Now listen, both of you, because I can help you, and I can also ruin you by helping you too loudly, and I need you to understand the difference. Officially, the ministry has no view on the seat of Blackmore. It is older than us. It is not ours to award. If I put a thumb on this scale, Selwyn's people will call it the minister seizing an ancient house for his allies, and they will not be wrong enough for it to be safe, so I will be scrupulously neutral in public." He lowered his voice. "In private, I am telling you what I know. Selwyn has spent the summer whipping the traditionalist bloc into a single vote. He has not done that in years. He is not doing it for Perseus Black, whom he finds distasteful. He is doing it because a throne that wakes for a resurrected squib line and a half-blood is a throne that proves the whole architecture of blood is a lie. And if that lie falls in public in gold at the equinox, then every pureblood family that ever burned a cousin has to look at what they did. He is not fighting for a chair. He is fighting for the story his entire cast tells itself about why it deserves what it has. That makes him more dangerous than Perseus, not less, and it means the equinox is not a private family matter. Half the country will be watching what your throne decides about them." "We know," Hermione said. "That's why it has to be clean. No favors, no thumbs on scales. If we win it in front of everyone on the oldest law there is, so that not even Selwyn can say it was fixed." Kingsley looked at her a moment. "You really are rather alarming," he said. "Andromeda said you would be." He opened the door. "She's waiting for you by the lifts, by the way, and she has that look she gets. Go carefully, you two. You've made powerful people afraid today, and the useful thing about frightened powerful people is that they overreach. The dangerous thing is what they do on the way there." Andromeda was indeed waiting by the lifts, and her level face had gone tight at the edges, and she did not waste time on congratulation. "There was a man watching the two of you leave the chamber," she said low, falling into step between them. "Not press, not Wisengamot, continental cut, cold eyes gone the moment he saw me clock him. I know that build, I grew up with that build." She pressed the lift button. "Perseus has people here, and they are not the sort who came to witness a hearing. Whatever comes next, it will not wait for the equinox. Get home, get behind the wards. And do not, either of you, open anything that arrives before I've had Creature look at it." She was right, which they discovered within the hour. It was waiting for them when they got back to Blackmore, and it came in a beautiful box. Creature found it in the entrance hall on the great black table where the elves laid the post, a flat parcel of dark silk-papered wood tied with silver ribbon, with a card that said, in a fine cold continental hand, to the claimants of the second line, with the compliments of the Vienna branch, that there be no ill feeling between kin. It was addressed to both of them. It was, Hermione would say afterward, extremely well made, which was the tell, because no one who wished you well spent that much on the packaging. "Don't," Harry said, but Creature had already lifted it, and the old elf went very still and his ears flattened, and he set it down again with the care of a man setting down a sleeping adder. It is not a gift, Creature said. It hums the wrong way. He looked up. Creature will not open it. Creature's mother taught him the humming. It is a vanishing curse, an old one, a black one. It does not kill the hand that opens it. It unmakes the blood. It is made to be opened by two, and to take the two, and to leave no bodies for the wall to write back. His old voice shook. They have sent you a thing built to end a conquered. Do not touch it. Do not let it. He did not finish, because the box, sensing perhaps that it had been recognized, began to open itself. The silver ribbon uncoiled like something alive. The silk paper peeled back, and out of the beautiful box rose a coil of pale nothing, a smoke that was not smoke, an absence shaped like a reaching hand, and it came up off the table and turned, blind and hungry, toward the two people it had been addressed to, toward Harry and toward Hermione standing side by side, and Harry had his wand half up, knowing already it would not be enough, that this was old cruel work, and a shield charm was a paper wall against it, and Blackmore woke. The whole hall rang with the single deep note of the seat, struck hard, struck in anger, and the cold gold light flared in every vein of the black stone at once, and the raven over the great door turned its head and screamed, a sound no bird had ever made, and out of the floor and the walls and the very air of the waking hall the family magic rose to meet the thing that had been sent to unmake its heirs. The reaching absence met a wall of gold. It recoiled. It struck again, and the gold folded around it, patient and vast and utterly without mercy, and Harry watched the House of Black do the one thing it had never once managed in 900 years of history. He watched it protect its own. Nothing thinned and shredded and was drawn down into the golden floor and gone, and the beautiful box burst into a fine gray ash that the hall swept up and cast out through the opening door onto the moor, and would not keep so much as a splinter within its walls. The deep note faded, the light banked back to embers, and in the sudden ringing quiet Hermione let out a breath and reached over without a word and took Harry's hand and found it already reaching for hers. The family came at a run. Sirius arrived first, wand up, taking in the scene, the swept floor, the two of them standing whole and joined in the middle of it. Andromeda came behind him and Narcissa behind her, arrived through the flue she should not have been able to reach and had reached anyway, with Draco a step behind, and for a moment the entrance hall of Blackmore held the strangest gathering the house had assembled in a generation. 3 sisters worth of black blood in one room, 2 of them estranged from the third for 30 years, all of them looking at a patch of swept stone where a curse had just tried to unmake the heirs. Narcissa did not ask if they were hurt. She crossed to the black table, knelt, and passed one gloved hand an inch above the stone where the box had sat, and her cold face went still. Vanishing work, she said. Old, ours. This was made in a black workshop or copied faithfully from a black pattern, which amounts to the same insult. She rose. Corvinus and Ludmilla, of course. Perseus will have known nothing about it. He will be, at this moment, genuinely irritated with his cousins for their impatience, and he will say so, and it will be true, and it will not matter, because he is the reason they think 2 dead heirs are worth the trouble. She looked at Sirius. This is the shape of the whole thing now, cousin. He keeps his hands clean and lets the cold ones do the killing and stands ready to disavow every one of them. It is how our family has always worked. He is only better at it than most. Then we stop pretending it's a lawsuit, Sirius said grimly. It's a siege. They've opened with a curse 2 hours after losing on paper. Blackmore held today. Blackmore will not always be where you are. From now on, one of us is with you at all times, and I mean one of the difficult ones, one of the ones who grew up learning exactly what our family sends when it wants someone gone. He looked at his cousins, at Andromeda, and at Narcissa, the 3 of them the last adult blacks left standing. We failed at this for 900 years, every single generation. We are not going to be the ones who fail at it now in the one generation it finally matters. No, Narcissa agreed, cool and exact, we are not. And then, because she was who she was, she turned her gray eyes on Harry and Hermione and delivered the thing she had actually come to say. The box tells us something useful if you can bear to think about it cleanly. It was built for 2, addressed to 2, keyed to 2, made to take the conquered entire. Corvinus and Ludmilla do not fear that you are 2 rival claimants they would face at the seat and beat, or believe they would. They fear that you are the true conquered, the real thing, the joined pair the throne was built for, because if you are, then their contract marriage stands no chance in front of the seat, and their only path to the throne is to make sure you never reach it. She let the silence hold. They are more certain of what you are than you are. I find that instructive. The enemy has already conceded in curse work, the very thing you are still frightened to say aloud to each other. The hall was very quiet. Draco by the door was studying the swept stone with the particular attention of a young man who had once stood on the other side of exactly this kind of family, and had reasons of his own to be glad the box had failed. Then we spend the 56 days learning to be certain, Hermione said, and her voice had come back level. Ragnarok said the blood is only admission. The seat wakes for conquered, a true one, freely made, and we've woken it once, but once isn't the equinox, and I won't stand in front of that thing on the most watched day in a century hoping. We need to understand the conquered completely, what it is, what it costs, what the founders actually did, Corvus and Lyra, when they bound themselves to it. If there's a right, we learn the right. If there's a price, we pay it with our eyes open. She looked at Sirius and at the portraits leaning from the walls. The library here goes back to the founding. Somewhere in it is exactly how two people become the one joined thing the seat will answer to. We find it, and we do it properly, and we walk into the equinox knowing, not hoping. The grimoire of the founders is sealed in the deep library, said a dry voice from the wall, and they turned to find that Phineas Nigellus had walked out of his frame at Grimmauld Place and into a smaller one here, portraits being the great gossips and travelers of the wizarding world. Below the hall, near the Heartstone. It opened for no one in my lifetime, living or painted. But then, nothing in this house has behaved as it did in my lifetime since the two of you walked through the door. He inclined his painted head, and there was something almost like approval in it. It may open for you. Most things here do now. Go down when you are ready, children, and take a great deal of care, because the founders did not write easy books, and what they bound themselves to was not a small thing, and you will not come up the same as you went down. They did not speak until much later on the ramparts of Blackmoor, where they had gone because the hall, kind as it now was too full of what had almost happened. The moor ran out black and silver under a rising moon. The wind had gone soft. Somewhere below, Creature was directing 3 younger elves in the ancient and comforting business of making far too much soup. He'll say it wasn't him, Hermione said at last, Perseus. He'll say the Vienna cousins acted on their own, that he knew nothing, that it's beneath him. And the awful thing is he'll be telling the truth, and it won't matter, because he's the one who told them the seat needs 2 and put a price on our being alive. She wrapped her arms around herself against the wind. That's what he is, Harry, not the hand on the box, the mind that makes the box worth sending. He'll never once do a thing that a court could touch, and people will die around him his whole life, and he'll be genuinely puzzled that anyone blames him. I know what he is. Harry moved to stand beside her, shoulder to shoulder against the wind, the same posture they had stood in before the throne. I want to talk about what you are. She glanced at him. In that chamber today, Harry said, you defended your right to be a black using a charter written by the 2 people who built the throne. You caught 900 years of a family in its own founding lie. And then we came home, and that same family threw a wall of gold in front of a curse built to end us, because you're its heir and it will not lose you again. He turned to look at her. You've spent your whole life waiting for someone to tell you there's been a mistake. I watched you argue today like a woman who stopped waiting. And I need you to know I saw it, because I don't think you did, because you were too busy winning. You didn't ask that chamber to let you belong. You informed it that you already did in law and dared it to argue. His mouth moved. I've never seen anything like it, and I've seen a lot of things. Hermione was quiet a moment, looking out at the moor. It's easier up here, she said finally, with you. It's harder when I'm alone and it's 3 in the morning and some part of me is still 11 and still waiting for the letter that says the magic was a clerical error and I have to go back to being ordinary. She turned to face him. That part didn't go away when the rock read me, Harry. I thought it would. I stood in front of the seat and it brightened and I thought there, now the frightened part is finished. And then we came home and a box tried to unmake me, and the first thing I felt wasn't fear. It was that old stupid certainty that of course, the moment I dared to want this it would be taken away, because girls like me don't get to keep the throne. That part's still in there. I don't know how to cut it out. Then don't cut it out. Harry took both her hands. It's not a flaw, Hermione. It's the reason you checked the box before we opened it. It's the reason you read the whole charter and not just the useful pages. The part of you that's still waiting to be found out is the part that never once let either of us walk into a room unprepared, and it kept me alive for 7 years, and I am not going to stand on a rampart and tell you to be rid of it. He tightened his hands on hers. I'm going to do the other thing. Every time it tells you there's been a mistake, I'm going to be standing here telling you there hasn't. That's the deal. You do the doubting, I'll do the not doubting, and between us we'll have the whole truth covered from both sides. It's how we've always worked. It's why the chair likes us. He looked at her steadily in the moonlight. You don't have to stop being afraid you don't belong. You just have to let me belong here with you, so you're never doing the being afraid alone. Can you do that? For a moment she only looked at him, up on the ramparts of the house that had grown her a line back from ash, with the more silver below and the deep note of the seat sounding faint and steady through the stone under their feet. I can do that, Hermione said. And she stepped in close against the wind and put her head on his shoulder, and Harry put his arm around her and held on. And below them in the warm, bright kitchen of Blackmoor, the elves lit the last of the lamps against the dark, and the House of Black kept its airs and did not let go. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Towders per the deep library of Blackmoor lay one turn of the stair below the throne, and it opened for them the way a hand opens, slowly and only because it wanted to. They went down together with the equinox less than 3 weeks off, the weeks between spent fortifying the hall and mapping Perseus's every move, until Phineas at last judged them ready for the deeper room. Creature's lamp was between them, and the deep note sounded faint and patient through the stone. The stair let them past the threshold of the throne chamber, where the onyx throne waited in its ember light, and down again, deeper, into a round room smaller than the throne chamber and older, its walls not stone but shelving, cut from the same black glass-veined rock and grown full of books. Thousands of them. The whole memory of the House of Black, going back past the ministry, past the statute of secrecy, past the coming of any king to Britain the Muggles would remember, down to the two who had raised the hall out of the moor and written the first word in the first book with a quill dipped in their own mingled blood. At the center of the room, on a lectern of black stone that had grown up out of the floor to hold it, lay one book alone. It was very large and very plain, bound in undyed leather gone the color of old bone, and it had no title, because the two who wrote it had not imagined a world in which anyone would need to be told what it was. As Harry and Hermione came toward it, hand in hand because they had stopped pretending they walked into these rooms any other way, the book stirred, and its cover lifted, and it fell open of its own accord to the first page, and the deep note sounded once, welcoming, and the coal gold light rose in the veins of the shelves all around them until the whole round library glowed like the inside of a lantern. "It knows we're here," Hermione breathed. She reached out and stopped, her fingers a hair above the page. Harry. "This is the Founder's hand," both of them. Looked, two inks, two scripts, one dark and heavy and one fine and quick all through it, answering each other down the margins. They wrote it together, every page they argued in it. She bent closer, reading, and the light moved with her eyes. "Corvus writes a line and Lyra writes underneath it, 'No, husband, you have that backward,' and he writes back, and oh, they never stopped. 900 years and you can still hear them not agreeing about anything. It's the most married book I've ever seen." Harry looked at the two inks braided down the ancient page, the heavy dark hand and the fine quick one, arguing, correcting, teasing, agreeing at last in a third place neither had started from, and he understood the throne a little better for it. "Read it to me," he said. "All of it, however long it takes. I want to know exactly what they did before we decide whether to do it too." So they read the grimoire of the Founders, and it took them the whole of that day and most of the next, and it changed the shape of what they had come north to do. The story it told was not the one the family had kept. The family had kept a story of blood, of Corvus the elder and Lyra the younger, two heirs of two branches who had joined their lines to found a great pure house. The grimoire told a story of a marriage, and of a quarrel that never ended, and of the strangest and strongest working ever raised by wizards in Britain, built for a reason the family had spent 9 centuries being too proud to remember. Corvus and Lyra had not been of one branch and its junior. They had been the whole of the house, its only 2 lines, and they had disagreed about everything a person could disagree about. He was for the old blood in the closed door, she was for the open hand and the wide net, for marrying magic outward and gathering it back stronger. He trusted power, she trusted people. He would have built the house as a fortress, she would have built it as a hearth. And the grimoire in its 2 braided inks made no secret that they had come within a breath of tearing the young house in 2 between them, and that they had done instead the harder thing. They had built a working that required them both, so that neither could ever rule without the other, so that the house could never become only a fortress or only a hearth, but must be always the argument between them, held in balance forever. The grimoire showed them the making of it, and the showing was not words. Where the 2 inks reached the raising of the seat, the page went dark under Harry's hand, and the dark became a window, and through the window 900 years fell away, and he was looking at the moor as it had been. No hall, no towers, only the wild high ground under a sky heavy with the first snow, and 2 figures small against it, standing where the heartstone broke the surface of the earth like the crown of a buried skull. He could not hear them. He did not need to. He could see the quarrel in the way they stood, close and furious, the man's dark shape all hard lines, the woman's turned half away, and he could see the moment the quarrel ended, which was not the moment either of them won. It was the moment the man put out his hand, palm up in the snow, in the cold, in the middle of everything they did not agree about, and the woman looked at the offered hand a long while, and then set her own knife to her palm and then to his, and pressed the 2 cuts together over the broken crown of the heartstone, so that their blood ran down together into the wound in the world. And the moor answered. In the window in the falling snow, the light came up out of the ground for the first time, the coal gold light rising in the veins of the waking stone, and where the 2 had stood arguing a chair grew up out of the rock to meet their joined and bleeding hands, black and vast and singing. And the 2 founders knelt before the thing their quarrel had made and wept, and did not let go of each other, and the snow fell on them and on the new-made throne and did not melt. Because the warmth of the seat was not that kind of warmth, it was the other kind, the kind that outlasts weather. The window closed, the page was only a page again, the 2 inks braided, arguing on toward the next thing they could not agree about. But Harry's hand had gone cold where it had rested on the glass of it, and Hermione's fingers had found his without either of them looking, and for a while they did not read at all, only sat with the size of what they had been shown. That the greatest working the House of Black ever raised had been built, in the snow, out of a quarrel, by 2 people who chose each other in the exact middle of not agreeing, and that this, precisely this, was what the seat had been listening for down 900 years of proud single wills that came to it certain they were right and went away certain they had been cheated. That's what the seat is, Hermione said on the second day, sitting on the floor of the deep library with the grimoire open across her knees and her voice gone soft with the size of it. It's not a throne of power, it's a lock on power. They didn't build it to hold the whole magic of the house so that one person could wield it. They built it to hold the whole magic of the house so that no one person ever could. 2 hands or nothing, 2 wills or it sleeps. They loved each other and they didn't trust either of themselves alone, and so they made certain that the house they founded would only ever run on both of them at once. She looked up, Towger's purr, always pure. The family thought it meant keep the blood clean. It never did. It meant keep the balance, keep the two. Never let it become the argument one, only the argument held. Purity of conquered, Harry. The one thing this family threw away the moment the founders were cold, because holding an argument forever is so much harder than winning it once. And the right, Harry asked. He had come to sit beside her close, his shoulder against hers, the lamp throwing their joined shadow up the wall of books. Ragnarok said the seat wakes for conquered freely made in the old right. Narcissa said it's a marriage. Is it? Is that what we'd be? Is that the price? Hermione turned the page and turned it again and came to a place where the 2 inks stopped arguing and wrote, for once together, the same words in both hands, the only place in the whole grimoire where they agreed absolutely. And she read it aloud slowly, and the deep note sounded under the words as she spoke them. This is the conquered, and it is not a marriage, though a marriage may carry it, and it is not a spell, though a spell may seal it. It is a choosing. 2 who are of the 2 lines come before the seat, and each puts into the others, keeping the thing that cannot be taken and can only be given, the whole of the self, held open, hiding nothing, trusting all. Blood is given, for blood is the proof the deep can read, but blood is only the token, the conquered is the trust. And the seat will know to the bottom of the stone whether the trust is true or performed, freely given or bargained for, and it will open only for the true and the free, and it will send away, or worse, every pair that comes to it with a seam between them the width of a single held-back thing. Come to the seat with nothing hidden from each other, or do not come. There is no third way. The seat was built by 2 who hid nothing at the last, and it will accept no less, for it is made of exactly that, and it knows its own. For a while neither of them said anything. The lamp burned, the 2 inks ended on the page, agreeing. Nothing hidden, Harry said at last. That's the price, not blood, not a wedding, just everything, the whole self held open to each other. He was quiet. That's why the contract marriages always failed. That's why Corvinus and Ludmilla will fail. You can't perform that, you can pay any price except that one. Either there's nothing between you or there is, and the rock can feel the difference in the dark. Yes, Hermione said. Her voice had gone very careful. That's the price. She closed the grimoire gently and set it aside, and turned to look at him in the cold gold light of the deep library, and Harry saw that they had arrived at last, without meaning to, at the room at the end of the whole long journey, the one Ragnarok had named in the deep, and neither of them had known how to enter, the room where the last question waited. But before she could speak it, the library spoke first. It began as the deep note, but it changed, deepened, doubled, and the cold gold light in the veins of the shelves brightened and began to move, running along the black stone toward the center of the room, toward the 2 of them gathering. The grimoire, set aside, lifted from the floor and hung in the air open, turning its own pages. And a voice came out of the stone that was not the note and not the elves and not the portraits, a voice made of 2 voices, one heavy and one fine, braided, the way the inks were braided, the founders themselves speaking out of the working they had become. You have read the book, said the 2-voiced stone. Now the house will read you. No pair comes to the conquered untried. We were tried, and we set the trials here for those who would follow, that none should bind themselves in a night's passion and repent it in the cold morning of 900 years. You will be tested, children of the 2 lines, before you are ever brought to the seat, not for your power, for your trust. Stand and be tried and hide nothing, for the house is watching now, and it does not blink. The trials of Blackmore were not duels, and Harry, who had braced for duels, found the truth of them harder. The first was a room that filled with dark. The library dissolved around them, and they stood in a blackness so complete that Harry could not see his own hand, could not see Hermione, could hear nothing but the deep note, and a cold began to rise out of the floor that was not the cold of air. It was the cold of the worst nights of his life, drawn up one after another, the cupboard under the stairs, the graveyard, the forest where he had walked to die. Old shapes moved at the edges of it, the shapes his mind kept in its worst drawers, and each of them wore, when it turned, a face he had failed to save. And the working of the house said, out of the dark, and the 2 braided voices find each other, and you pass, each alone, and you fall, and know that the dark is not the test, the dark is only the room. The test is whether, when you can see nothing and save no one and the worst of your life is standing at your shoulder, you still believe the other is reaching back. Harry did not reach with his hands. He had learned long ago that reaching with his hands for Hermione in the dark was the slow way, because in the dark hands find only more dark. He did the other thing, the thing 10 years had taught him. He stopped listening to the shapes. He said her name once quietly into the cold, the way you say the one true word in a room full of lies. And out of the blackness, close and steady and unafraid, she said his, and he walked toward the sound of her across a floor that was not there, trusting it to hold because she was on the far side of it, and her voice came again, nearer, guiding, and his answered, and they found each other by sound alone in a dark that wanted them lost, and their hands met in the middle of the blackness, and the dark broke like a struck window and let the light back in. The second trial was worse because it was kind. The working showed them each the thing they most wanted and were most afraid to want, and it offered it, whole and easy and free, on the single condition that they take it alone and say nothing to the other. The founders had built cruelty into the first trial and temptation into the second, and the temptation was the harder because temptation does not feel like a test. It feels like a mercy. Harry stood in a warm imagined kitchen full of the family he had never had, his parents at the table, ordinary and alive, the wireless on, the kettle just off the boil, and the working murmured that he could stay, that no one need know, that Hermione had her own door into her own warm room and would never miss him. And Harry looked at his mother's imagined face, and it was very good work, better than the mirror had ever managed, and he said, "You've got her voice wrong. She wouldn't tell me to keep a secret from Hermione, she'd have liked her." And he turned from the warm kitchen and its easy peace and walked back out into the cold. Hermione's door opened onto a life without the constant proving. He would not learn this until much later, and only because she chose to tell him. The trial did not require it, and the not telling was the whole of the passing. But her door had shown her a world where she had never once had to earn her place in a room, where the magic came without the ache of always being the first to have to justify it, where two people who understood exactly what she was sat waiting with all the time in the world and none of the fear. And the working had whispered that she could have it, all of it, the belonging she had wanted since she was 11, if she would only step through alone and let Harry find his own way in the dark. And Hermione had stood in the door of the one thing she had wanted her whole life and looked at it and said, "You've made it too safe. Nothing in my life has ever come without him on the other side of it, and I don't want a belonging he isn't in. That's not the thing I wanted. That's just the thing I was afraid I couldn't have." And she turned from the open door and walked back out into the cold. They found each other there in the dark between the two abandoned mercies, already turned away, already refusing, and neither of them told the other what they had seen, because they had already chosen against it, and that was the whole of the test. The third trial did not end exactly. It opened. The dark and the offering fell away, and they were standing in the deep library again, the grimoire hanging open and turning in the air before them. The cold gold light banked warm in all the veins of the shelves, and the two-voiced stone was silent, waiting, and Harry understood that the last trial was not a thing the house would do to them. It was a thing they had to do themselves. It was the last question, and no working in the world could ask it for them. Hermione turned to face him in the golden light. "All right," she said, and her voice was not steady, and she had stopped at last, trying to make it so. "All right, nothing hidden, that's the price, and I've been paying every price but that one my whole life, so let me just say the thing, Harry, the actual thing, before I lose my nerve, because I have faced a dark lord more easily than I can face this, and that is the truest and most ridiculous fact about me." She drew a breath. "I have loved you since I was 15 years old. Not the way people mean when they say it lightly, the other way, the way that reorganized everything. I loved you through the war, and I loved you at Ron's wedding when I was so glad he'd found Padma, and so quietly certain I'd already spent the only heart I had. And I loved you across every breakfast table for 2 years while I told myself that having all of you as a friend was more than most people ever get. And it is more than most people get, and it was never, ever enough. And I never said it because I was afraid that saying it was the one thing that could cost me the part I already had." Her eyes were bright and level and did not look away. "So there it is, nothing hidden. I love you, I have for years, and I am not saying it to wake a throne. I would say it in a world with no throne in it at all. I'm only saying it here because here, finally, I'm not allowed to be a coward about it anymore." Harry looked at her in the deep library of the house that had grown her a line back from ash, with the founder's grimoire turning its pages in the golden air and the deep note sounding soft through the stone, and he did the bravest and easiest thing he had ever done, which were, he discovered, sometimes the same thing. He reached up and cupped her face in both hands, the way you hold something you have been careful with for a very long time and are done being careful with, and he said, 15. You've got me beat. His thumb moved along her cheekbone. "I've loved you since 6th year, and I know exactly when, and I've never told a living soul, so this is the nothing hidden part for me. It was the day after a very bad week, and you sat down next to me without saying anything and did your arithmancy while I stared at the fire, and I looked over at you frowning at a chart, and I thought, oh, it's her. It's been her the whole time, and I've been calling it something smaller because the something smaller was safe. And then there was a war, and there was never a right moment, and after the war I told myself the same lie you did, that having all of you as my best friend was more than I had any right to, and I wasn't going to gamble it for more." He shook his head slowly. 2 years, Hermione. 2 years we've been sitting across a breakfast table, both believing the same lie, each of us protecting a friendship that neither of us actually wanted to keep at that price. We are supposed to be the clever ones. We are extremely stupid, Hermione agreed, and her voice cracked in the middle of it, and she laughed, and it came out wet, and she did not care. We are the two stupidest clever people in Britain. The Rock agrees, Harry said. It grew you a whole line back from ash to put you in a room with me, and it took us 900 years and a murder attempt to say 4 words to each other. He drew her forehead down against his. I love you. I'm not saying it to wake a throne either. There's no throne in this. There's just you frowning at a chart being the only place I've ever wanted to be. The throne can have whatever's left over. It's getting the smaller half. And Hermione closed the last inch between them, there in the golden light of the deep library, and kissed him, and it was not a spell, and it was not a rite, and it was not for the seat or the family or the equinox or any watching thing. It was only the two of them finally, after 10 years and a war and 2 years of a shared and stubborn lie, choosing what they had already been, out loud, with nothing held back at all. And all around them, in every vein of the black stone, the cold gold light blazed up bright and warm and singing, and the deep note swelled into the full chord they had heard in the throne chamber, the two voices twining whole, and the grimoire hanging in the air turned its pages to the very end, to the last leaf, where the two braided inks had written together in both hands the final line of the founder's book, a line no living black had read in 900 years, because the book had never once in all that time opened for a pair that earned it. So it is done, the last line read. The two are two no longer, and are not therefore one, but are the thing the house was built to hold, two, joined and free. Towger's purr. Wake the seat, children. It has been so very lonely, and you are exactly what it has waited for. They came up from the deep library changed, as Phineas had promised, and the family took one look at them coming into the lamplit hall hand in hand with the gold still on them, and did not need to be told a single thing. Andromeda set down her tea. Sirius, who had been pacing, went still. Then Sirius crossed the hall, and he did not say any of the clever things he was so good at saying, the deflections, the jokes that kept the world at arm's length. He put his arms around Harry hard, as he had wanted to for the 14 years he had spent in a cell or on the run or dead and not dead while his godson grew up without him. Your father, he said, rough against the side of Harry's head, spent 7 years telling me he'd fallen for the cleverest witch in our year, and I told him he was a fool, and he was, and it was the best foolishness a Potter ever committed, and I watched it save both their lives more than once before the end. He drew back and held Harry by the shoulders and looked at him. I have wondered every day since I got out what I was for now, whether I'd missed the whole of the job of you, and here you are, come up out of a library that no black was ever fit to enter, holding the hand of a girl who's going to spend the rest of her life making you brave in the useful direction. I didn't do that. I got here far too late to do that, but I get to see it. His voice caught and he let it, which the old Sirius never would have. That's the thing they never tell you about coming back from the dead, Harry. You don't come back for the grand moments. You come back for this one, for standing in a warm hall watching the person you'd have died for choose the person they were always going to choose. I'd do the whole of Azkaban again for this exact 10 seconds. Don't tell anyone I said so. I have a reputation. Too late, Harry managed. There are 11 portraits and a very emotional elf. Creatures weeping into the soup again, Andromeda confirmed. It will be salty. We will all eat it and say nothing. And Narcissa Malfoy, who missed nothing, looked at the two of them and at the cold gold light that now moved faintly under their skin where the Concord's right had begun to take, and something crossed her cold, beautiful face that she did not trouble this once to put away. Well, she said softly, there it is, the seam is gone. I have been looking for it since Blackmore, and there is no seam in the two of you at all. She rose and crossed the hall and stood before them, and did the thing Harry would not have believed of her a month before. She inclined her head, the deep exact bow of one black to the head of the house, cold pride bending at last to something it had decided was real. I came to trade in things of value, Narcissa said. So here is the most valuable thing I have, given freely, which I have not done in 30 years and find I am out of practice at. I am with you, not the winning side of you. You. Whatever comes at the equinox, my vote, my knowledge, my name, my son, and whatever is left of the reputation of the least disgraced black are yours. Because I have spent my whole life in a family that won its arguments and lost its soul, and I would like, before I die, to have stood once with the two who finally chose to hold the argument instead. She straightened. Also, Perseus came to see me again yesterday, and I did not tell you at once because I wished to see this first, and now that I have seen it I am very much afraid, and I am never afraid, so you had both better sit down. The hall went quiet. He has found his forcing, Narcissa said. The third victory, the one I hoped did not exist. She drew a folded paper from her sleeve and did not hand it over yet, holding it like a thing that might bite. In the sealed vaults of the Vienna branch there was a working the founders made and then unmade or tried to unmake, because it was the one thing they feared their own descendants would find. Corvus and Lyra built the seat to open only for a true Concord. But Corvus, the grimoire, will not tell you this, and I had it from a portrait in Vienna that should have been burned long ago. Corvus in his last years grew afraid that no true conquered would ever come again, and in his fear he began a second working. A key of force. A way to compel the seat to open for a single will, by binding a second person to that will so completely that the seat is deceived into reading them as one not a conquered, but a puppet in a hand. Two bodies, one will, the seam hidden not by love but by domination. Lyra found it and stopped it, and they quarreled as they had never quarreled, and it was left unfinished and sealed away. Her gray eyes were steady and cold. Perseus has the sealed working. He has had it a month, and he no longer intends to bring Corvinus and Ludmilla as a marriage of convenience and hope the seat is fooled. He intends to bind one of them to the other by Corvus's forcing wholly, will and self, and bring to the onyx throne a false conquered that the old magic cannot tell from a true one, and take the sovereignty of the house by making a living person into a lock's second key. That's Hermione had gone pale. Narcissa, that's an unforgivable stacked on an unforgivable. To bind someone's whole will like that permanently, to hollow them out into a yes, said Narcissa. It is the worst thing our family ever designed, and it is why the founders hid it, and it is exactly the sort of thing a man like Perseus reads as a solution rather than an atrocity. He will tell himself the cousins consented, perhaps one of them even has, it will not make it less obscene. She finally held out the folded paper. This is what I could copy of the forcing before the portrait lost its nerve. I do not fully understand it. But you two now share a conquered the founders themselves would recognize, and if anyone alive can read Corvus's cruelest working and find the flaw in it before the equinox, it is the woman who just caught the whole Wisengamot in a 900-year-old charter. Her voice, for once, was not cold at all. Find the flaw, Hermione. Because he is coming to Blackmore at the turning of the light with a hollowed-out person and a stolen key, and a true conquered is only stronger than a forced one if the true conquered knows exactly how the forcing breaks. Hermione took the paper. She did not open it yet. She looked at it and then at Harry, and Harry watched the whole formidable engine of her turn in real time, from the softest thing in the world to the sharpest. From the girl who had said I love you in a golden library to the woman who was going to take Corvus Black's worst working apart on a table and find the crack in it. And he loved both of her exactly the same, and that, he understood, was rather the entire point of the thing they had just done. Then we've got 17 days, Hermione said, and a lot of reading. She reached out and took Harry's hand, and the cold gold light moved warm between their joined palms, and the deep note sounded once through the whole house, steady, unafraid. Good thing we're the two stupidest clever people in Britain. We're about to need all of it. She turned Corvus's forcing into a war, and she waged it in the deep library, on a long table the elves brought down, under the founder's grimoire and every book of dark working the house had ever hidden. Harry fetched and carried and read aloud and held the lamp, and more than once put a mug of tea down in front of her and physically closed a book to make her sleep. But the war was hers, and Harry had learned a decade ago that the finest thing he could do in it was guard her flank and let her think. Narcissa came down to the library, which no living Black but the two of them had entered, and stood among the shelves with her arms folded and answered questions about the Vienna branch in her cold, exact voice. Andromeda came down and made everyone eat. And Draco came down on the fourth day and stood in the doorway a long time before anyone noticed him, and then said, not quite steadily, I know what the forcing feels like from the inside, if that's any use to you. I know what it is to have a will laid over your own until you can't find the edge of where you stop. He did not look at any of them. No one made me an offer, I'm making it. Ask me anything about being someone else's hand. I've been one, I'd rather it were finally good for something. It was Draco, in the end, who found the crack, or found the place where Hermione's mind could get its blade into it. It isn't seamless, he said on the 11th night, turning the copid working over on the table with the specific attention of a person examining a scar he owns. That's the lie of it, that's what Perseus believes, and what people like Corvus always believe. They think if you dominate a will completely, there's no seam left, one will clean. But there is always a seam, I promise you there is. However deep they bury it, the forced person is still in there underneath, saying no in a voice too small to hear. The domination doesn't erase the no, it just builds a wall over it thick enough that no one on the outside can hear it anymore. He looked up. The seat can hear everything you told me, to the bottom of the stone, so the question isn't whether Perseus can hide the seam from you, it's whether he can hide it from a thing that listens all the way down. Hermione went very still. Say that again, she said, the exact thing, the person underneath is still saying no. Always, said Draco, in a voice too small to hear. Hermione stood up so fast her chair went over, and she went to the grimoire and she turned pages and she read, and Harry watched the whole engine of her go incandescent, the thing he had watched across 100 crises, the moment the scattered pieces snapped into a single blade. That's it, she said, that's how it breaks, listen. The seat opens for a true conquered because it reads two selves, whole, freely given, nothing hidden, two yeses, essentially offered open. Perseus's forcing hides the seam so the seat reads Corvinus and Ludmilla as one will instead of two, but it's not making a yes, it's burying a no, and a buried no is not the same as a given yes, no matter how deep the wall. The seat isn't fooled into reading a concord, it's reading a single will wearing a second self like a glove, and it will open for that only because it can't hear the small voice under the wall. She turned bright and fierce in the lamplight, so we make it here. At the reckoning, when Perseus brings his forced pair to the seat, we don't outclaim him. We can't. His blood is as good as ours. We make the seat listen deeper than his wall is thick. We amplify the small voice. We give the hollowed-out person one clear moment to say no loud enough for a thing that hears to the bottom of the stone to catch it. And the instant the seat hears a no inside a concord it was told was one will, the whole forcing collapses because the founders built the seat above everything else to refuse a will that holds another self against its own consent. It's the entire point of the seat. Corvus built the forcing to beat the lock. He forgot he'd built the lock personally to hate exactly that. And can we, Harry asked, amplify the small voice in the moment in front of everyone? A true concord can, Hermione said. That's the beautiful, awful symmetry of it, Harry. The forcing is one will silencing a second self. The concord is two selves held open, nothing hidden, freely given. They're opposites, they're the exact opposites, and a thing built of the second can reach into a thing built of the first and find the buried no and hold a door open for it, because reaching into another self without taking it over is the one power true concord has and a forcing never will. She looked at him and at Narcissa and at Draco standing in the doorway who had handed her the blade without knowing he had it. We can save whichever cousin he's hollowed out, that's what this means. We don't just beat Perseus at the equinox. If we do it right, we reach into the person he turned into a key, and we give them back the word he stole, and we let them say it, and the seat does the rest. Narcissa Malfoy looked at her son in the doorway, and then at the girl the family had tried to burn, and her cold face did a thing it was not built to do, and she did not stop it. Towger's purr, she said quietly. My mother made me embroider it on things. I always thought it meant we were better than everyone, and here is my son, who I could not save, handing the key to saving someone else to a girl we tried to erase, in a library no black has been fit to enter for 900 years. She drew a breath and put the cold back on because it was all she had for armor, but her eyes had changed. 6 days. Learn to reach the small voice, both of you, until you could do it in your sleep. Because Perseus will not warn us which cousin he has hollowed, and you will have one moment in front of the whole assembled house, to hear a no no one else can hear and hold the door for it. Do not miss. We won't, Harry said. He crossed to Hermione and set his hand at the small of her back, and the cold gold light moved warm between them where the concord lay in their blood, and the deep note sounded once through the whole waking house, steady and certain, and no longer in any corner of it, alone. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The gathering stormed the night before the equinox. Blackmore did not sleep, and neither did anything in it. Harry found Hermione on the east rampart an hour before the others gathered in the cold, watching the moor for lights that were not there yet. She had a mug of tea she was not drinking, and the concord's cold gold glow moved faintly under the skin of her hands where the right had begun to root, and when he came up beside her she leaned into his shoulder without looking away from the dark. Below them the elves were carrying things through the lit corridors, and the sound of it came up thin and busy on the wind. I keep running the plan, she said, every branch of it. And there's a version of tomorrow where it goes wrong, and I've made myself look at that one too, because not looking at it is how people die. She turned the cold mug in her hands. In that version, one of them doesn't come home. Sirius at the falconry gate alone because he insisted. Andromeda at the arch, and I put them there, Harry. I built the plan that puts the people I love between us and the cold ones, and if the plan is wrong, the plan isn't wrong. And they're not there because you put them there. Harry took the mug out of her hands and set it on the parapet because she was going to hold it until it froze. They're there because they chose it, every one of them. Sirius stood in that hall and dared anyone to make him sit in the warm. Andromeda's been waiting 30 years for a night this house would let her fight for it. You didn't spend them, Hermione. They spent themselves on purpose for us because that is the entire thing we've been learning down in that library, that this family is finally choosing to protect its own, and you don't get to take that choice away from them by carrying it alone. He turned her to face him. You do the doubting, I do the not doubting, that's the deal. So here's the not doubting. Tomorrow we win and everyone comes home, and it's because you saw the drowned door and the falconry gate and the mourner's arch when Perseus thought there was only the front. You already saved them. You did it a week ago with a floor plan and 3 arguing portraits. Let yourself believe it for 1 hour before the fighting starts. She looked up at him in the light spilling from the lit windows below, and something in her set down at last, and she pressed her forehead to his jaw and breathed out and stayed there a moment in the cold with the house blazing beneath them. 1 hour, she agreed, against his neck. Then I'm taking the tea back and we're going down to war. 1 hour, Harry said and held her, and did not let go until the family called them down. The plan had a clean shape and Hermione had built it, and she had built it as she built everything, accounting for the parts other people forgot. At dawn on the equinox, the Wisengamot's witnesses would come, and Ragnarok and Gornuk to adjudicate, and the whole assembled house to watch, and the reckoning would be held before the onyx throne in the light of the balanced year. That was the sanctioned right, the one the law protected, the one Perseus had invoked in daylight to keep his hands clean. But a right protected by law was not a right protected by wards, and Hermione had read enough Black history to know that her family's fondest tradition was arriving early. "He'll come tonight," she said, in the warlit hall, with the family gathered and the great doors barred, and the Blackmore elves moving through the corridors lighting the deep lamps that had not been lit in 900 years. "Or his people will." Selwyn's given him cover for it, a whole traditionalist block ready to look the other way and call whatever happens here an internal matter of an ancient house. If Perseus can seize the throne chamber before the witnesses arrive, if he can force the seat in the dark with no one to see it fail, then at dawn he presents the sovereignty as already settled and dares anyone to contest a thing the old magic has apparently already decided. He doesn't want the reckoning, Harry. He never did. Reckoning is his fallback. His first choice is to win it tonight quietly, where the only witnesses are the ones he can afford. "Then we don't let him have quiet," Sirius said. He had spread a plan of Blackmore across the black table, drawn from memory and corrected by 3 portraits arguing over his shoulder, and his gray eyes had the old war light in them. "The hall has 1 great door and 11 ways in that the great door doesn't know about. My grandfather sealed most of them. Most is not all." He tapped the plan. "Creature, you know this house better than any living thing. Which ways are still open?" 4, said Creature, who had appointed himself quartermaster and had a list. "The kitchen stair to the old brewhouse. The falconry gate on the east tower, which the young Master Regulus used to slip out of, and which Creature never told the mistress about and is not sorry. The drowned door in the cellar, below the waterline of the deep cistern. And the mourner's arch on the north face, which opens only for grief and cannot be barred, for the founders made it so no black should ever be shut out of their own house to die alone on the moor." His ears flattened. "The cold ones will know the mourner's arch. Their kind always know the way that runs on sorrow. Creature will hold it himself." "You will not hold it alone," said Andromeda. She had put off her traveling black for something plainer and older, sleeves buttoned to the wrist, wand already in her hand, and she looked in the lamplight exactly like what she was, the last daughter of the House of Black who had learned to fight before she learned to run. "I have 30 years of not being welcome in this family, Creature, and I find I am not inclined to spend the one night it needs me sitting in the warm. You and I will hold the mourner's arch. I know a great deal about grief. Let them come to me through it." They took their places as the moon climbed, Narcissa and Draco to the drowned door, because Narcissa said coldly that she had spent her life in cellars pretending not to know what was done in them and would enjoy, for once, being on the defending side of one. Sirius to the falconry gate alone, wand loose in his hand, whistling something under his breath that Harry recognized after a moment as a Muggle song James had liked. The Blackmore elves to the corridors and the kitchen stair, dozens of them, small and gray and grim, each with a lamp in one hand, and Harry noticed something older than a lamp in the other, for the elves of an ancient house were not the elves of an ordinary one, and they had kept more than the dusting alive down 900 years of waiting. And Harry and Hermione went down to the throne chamber, because that was where it would end, whatever happened at the doors, and the 2 of them were the only defense that mattered there. "You should be at a gate," Hermione said as they descended the black stair into the ember light. "By every tactical principle I know, you're the best duelist here. And leave you alone with the throne when Perseus comes for it." Harry shook his head. "No. You worked out the whole plan and you left yourself off every gate, and I know why, and it's the same reason I'm not at one. It's going to come here. It's always going to come here. The doors are to slow it down and make it costly and keep the people I love from dying to buy us the minutes. But the fight that decides it happens in this room between us and him over that chair. So this is where I'll be, with you, where I've been since we were 11. He took her hand at the foot of the stair, and the cold gold light of the Concord moved warm between their palms. "We hold the seat. Everyone upstairs holds us. That's the shape of it. Let them come." They did not have long to wait. The first Harry knew of the assault was the deep note of the house, struck hard and wrong, ringing down through the stone, the sound of Blackmore taking a wound, then another. Then the whole hall above them woke to war, muffled through the rock, the crack and flare of curses, the high battle cry of the Blackmore elves, a sound no one living had heard, the war cry of an ancient house's bonded servants defending their own at last after 9 centuries of only waiting. Dust sifted down from the dome dark overhead. The ember light in the veins of the walls pulsed with each blow the house absorbed. Above them, the house was making the intruders pay. At the mourner's arch on the north face, the arch that ran on grief and could not be barred, Andromeda Tonks stood in the opening with her back to the warm-lit house and her face to the black moor, and she was not afraid, and the cold ones who came through the arch discovered, one after another, that they had chosen the worst possible door. They had chosen the door of grief, and Andromeda had more of it than any of them, and the arch, sensing the true mourner who kept it, lent her its strength. She fought as her family had bred her to fight and then refused to let them make her use, economical and merciless and beautiful, and beside her creature fought with an old high magic that no wizard had, elf magic, the deep bond magic of a servant defending the blood he had chosen, cracking the stone under an assassin's feet, turning a killing curse into a fall of harmless snow, and screaming the war cry of the Blackmoor elves that had not been heard since the founding. "You come through the mourner's arch," Andromeda told a masked continental duelist as she turned his wand arm to lead and dropped him where he stood, to a woman who buried her daughter. "You have brought grief to the house of the grieving, you poor arithmetic fool." And she held the arch, and creature held it with her, and the cold ones who came through it did not come through it twice. At the drowned door in the cellar, below the black waterline of the deep cistern, Narcissa Malfoy stood in cold water to her knees, and defended a doorway with the still, silent, appalling competence of a woman who had spent 20 years in the company of the worst people alive, and learned all of it and used none of it until tonight. She did not shout, she did not waste emotion. She stood in the drowned dark with her son at her shoulder, and she took the cistern's own water and turned it against the swimmers who came up through it. And Draco, pale and soaked and steadier than he had ever been in his life, guarded her flank and did not run. And when a curse meant for his mother came out of the dark, he stepped into it and turned it on his own shield and held. And Narcissa saw him do it, and something in her that had been frozen since before the war cracked, quietly in the cold water. And did not refreeze. "Well held," she said to her son in the drowned dark, and it was the finest thing she had ever given him, and they both knew it, and there was no time to say anything else because the cold ones kept coming, and the two of them kept turning them back. And at the falconry gate on the east tower, Sirius Black fought alone, and laughing, because he had waited 14 years in a cell and 2 more in hearings to stand in a doorway of his own family's house and defend the person he loved most in the world, and there was a kind of person for whom that was not a burden but a homecoming, and Sirius was that kind of person. He whistled his dead friend's favorite song between curses. He fought like a man who had already made his peace with dying and had then unexpectedly been given something worth living for, which is the most dangerous kind of duelist there is. He took a burn down one arm and did not stop. He held the falconry gate that his brother Regulus had once crept out of, and he thought of Regulus while he held it, and he did not let one of the cold ones pass. Down in the throne chamber, Harry and Hermione felt every blow of it through the stone, and could do nothing but hold the seat and trust the people they loved to hold the doors. "The drowned door," Hermione said, eyes closed, one hand flat on the wall, reading the house as she read everything. "They came through the cistern, Narcissa's holding. She's very good, Harry. She's better than she ever let anyone see. And the mourner's arch, Andromeda and creature, something came through the arch." Her hand pressed harder. "Something cold, it's past them, it's coming down. How many? 2. She opened her eyes. "Only 2 got past the doors. Everyone else is being held and made to pay for every step. 2 came down the deep stair." She looked at him. "It's him, it's Perseus, and he's brought one of the cousins." The stair delivered them out of the dark, and Perseus Black walked into the throne chamber of Blackmoor as though he had built it. He was not disheveled. That was the frightening thing. There was a war going on above him, and his cousins and hirelings were dying at the doors to buy him this room, and his severe black was uncreased, and his dark hair was combed, and his gray eyes were calm. Behind him, half a step behind and to the left, in the exact position of a servant or a wandarm, came the cousin, and Harry's stomach turned to see her, because Narcissa had described the forcing, and here it was made flesh. Ludmilla Black was beautiful and pale and perhaps 30, and she moved when Perseus moved and stopped when Perseus stopped, and her eyes were open and saw nothing, and there was a stillness on her face that was not calm. That was the stillness of a house with all its lights off and someone still inside. The forcing lay on her like a second skin. Somewhere under it, too small to hear, a person was saying no. "Mr. Potter," Perseus said pleasantly. "Miss Granger, I did hope you would be here. It saves so much searching. I confess the elves surprised me. I had not accounted for the elves. One always forgets the elves. It is the great vice of our class, and I see now it may prove the fatal one, though not, I think, tonight." He stopped a dozen feet from the foot of the onyx throne, and the cousin stopped with him, and he regarded the waking chair with the light of the conquered already faintly answering the 2 of them who stood before it, and something crossed his cold face that was almost hunger. "There it is, 900 years, and there it is, and it is already lit for you, which I will admit I did not expect and do not enjoy. No matter, it has been lit for the wrong claimant before. It has never once been made to open for one, but there is a first occasion for everything, and I have brought the key." "You've brought a person," Harry said. "You hollowed out a person and called her a key. Say what you actually did, Black. If you're going to do it in front of the seat, at least do it out loud." "I bound my cousin's will to mine, wholly and by her family's consent, that we might present to the seat a conquered it cannot refuse," Perseus said, unruffled, precise, a man reading a clause. "You find it distasteful. I find your sentimentality distasteful. We are neither of us going to persuade the other, and the chair does not care what either of us feels, only what it reads, and it will read Ludmilla and me as one will, seamless, and it will open, and the sovereignty of the house will be mine, and at dawn I will present it to the Wisengamot as a settled fact, and Selwyn's block will ratify it, and the world will go on believing that blood tells and thrones are won by the strong, which they are." He lifted his wand, not at them, at the throne, and the cousin lifted hers in perfect mirror, and the two of them turned toward the onyx throne as one. Do stand aside, or don't. The seat opens for me either way, and I would rather not have to explain two more deaths to a Wisengamot that is already tiresome about the war. Harry, Hermione said, very low, very fast, under the grand, cold speech. He's going to force it now in the dark, before the witnesses come. If it opens for him even wrongly, even for a minute, he'll have the house's whole magic, and we won't get him out. We can't let him complete the forcing, not here, not tonight. Her hand found his. But if we break the forcing now one-on-one, we show him exactly how we do it, and at the reckoning tomorrow in front of everyone he'll have guarded against it. We only get to break it clean once, we have to choose. Harry understood the trap in an instant, because it was a beautiful one and Perseus had built it. To let him force the seat tonight was to lose the house. To break the forcing tonight was to spend their one secret weapon in the dark where no one would see and hand Perseus a full night to armor against it before the real reckoning. Then we don't break it, Harry said just as low. We stop it, there's a difference. We keep him off the seat tonight without showing him the flaw. We fight him like duelists, not like a conquered. We save the reaching the small voice for tomorrow in front of everyone where it counts. He raised his voice. Black, you're not touching that chair while we're standing. And Perseus Black smiled and struck. The duel that followed was the fastest and the worst of Harry's life, and it was not one duel but a braid of them. Perseus was very good, cold and economical, and entirely without the tells that heat gave a man, and the forced cousin fought beside him in flawless silence, the two of them moving as the forcing made them move, one will in two bodies, so that Harry and Hermione faced not two duelists but a single four-armed thing that never got in its own way. Harry took Perseus, Hermione took the cousin. They had fought side by side since they were children, and it showed, the way they covered each other, the shield thrown a half-second before it was needed because one of them had seen what the other could not, and the cold gold light of the conquered moved between them and lent them something the forcing could only counterfeit. Not one will in two bodies, but two wills that trusted each other so completely they did not need to be one. A cutting curse took a chip off the arm of the onyx throne, and the whole chamber rang with the house's pain. Perseus drove Harry back toward the wall with a patient, remorseless sequence, each curse setting up the next, and Harry gave ground and let himself be driven, because being driven toward the wall put him where he wanted the light. The ember veins in the black glass ran thick just there. Harry's father had taught him nothing about dueling. He had learned it in a war, from a half-blood prince's stolen book and a dead headmaster and a girl who checked his work. But Blackmore had taught him something in 3 weeks that no book held, which was that the house was on his side, and when Perseus's killing sequence reached its last beat, Harry did not block it. He set his back to the thick gold vein in the wall and asked the house wordlessly in the old blood, and the house answered, and the light came up out of the stone at his back and took the curse for him, folding it into the wall the way it had folded the curse box, and Perseus's certain victory guttered out against a wall that loved the man it was defending. And then Harry came off the wall, and it was Perseus who gave ground. This was the thing about Harry Potter that people who had only read about him never understood. The scar and the luck and the dead parents were the least of him, and underneath them was a duelist forged in an actual war, who had learned his craft not from a fencing master in a warm hall but in graveyards and forests and a school under siege, against opponents who had meant it. He did not fight beautifully, he fought to end things. He drove Perseus back off the wall with a low, fast, economical sequence that had no elegance in it at all and no wasted motion either, and Perseus, who had expected a hero and gotten a survivor, recalculated on the retreat and did not enjoy the sum. Harry did not try to kill him, he had killed enough. Fought to keep the man off the seat, and that was a different and harder discipline. Defense turned into a wall of its own. Every curse of Perseus's turned or slipped or simply refused, and the house lending its weight to the refusing, so that Perseus Black found himself, for the first time in the night, unable to advance a single step toward the chair he had come 900 miles and one atrocity to claim. You fight like a man with nothing to prove, Perseus said, breathing harder now, circling. How tiresome, the proud ones I can beat, they overreach, you don't overreach. I did all my overreaching at 17, Harry said. Against worse than you, you're cold, Black, I'll give you that, but I've stood in front of the thing you're pretending to be, the real article, the one you're playing at, and he had you beat on every single count, and I put him in the ground anyway with her. He did not look away from the gray eyes, so no, you don't frighten me. You're just a clever man who's about to lose to two people who love each other, and the worst part for you is you still don't believe that's a real thing. The house fights for them, said a portrait on the chamber wall, an ancient Black leaning from her frame, and there was awe in it. It has never once fought for any of us, it fights for them. Hermione's duel with the cousin was a stranger thing, because Hermione was not trying to win it. She was trying not to hurt the woman inside the forcing, which meant she fought entirely on the defensive, turning aside the flawless silent curses without answering them, and she was losing, slowly, giving ground toward the seat, and Harry saw the moment she made the decision, saw her clever face go still and certain. She had said they must save the reaching for the reckoning. But saving it would cost the cousin her life tonight, because a forced servant fought until the body failed, and Ludmilla Black's body was failing, driven past its limit by a will that did not care if it burned her out. Hermione looked at the hollowed woman, at the person saying no too small to hear, and she looked at Harry, and Harry knew what she was going to do before she did it, and he loved her for it and was afraid of it in the same breath. "We save the reaching for tomorrow," he called. "Unless a life's on the table tonight, it's on the table, do it, I've got Perseus." And Hermione stopped fighting. She dropped her wand hand and stood open before the killing silent curse and reached instead the other way, the conquered way, the way the grimoire had taught them, not into the curse but past it, into the still dark house of the woman behind it, down under the wall of the forcing to the small voice at the bottom. And she said aloud in the ringing chamber the only thing that mattered, "Ludmilla, he can make your hands do this. He can't make you agree. I can hear you. I can hear the no. You're still in there and I can hear you, and you don't have to be his hands. Say it just once, just to me. Say no loud enough for the house to hear." For a moment nothing happened. The silent curse hung a foot from Hermione's open, undefended chest, and then the hollow woman's eyes, which had seen nothing, filled with tears, and her mouth, which had spoken nothing, moved, and out of the bottom of the shuttered house came a voice, cracked and small and growing, a woman surfacing from under 9 days of drowning. "Neen. Neen, I did not, I never agreed. Neen." And the curse fell dead from the air, and Ludmilla Black dropped to her knees on the black stone with her whole self flooding back into her at once, and the forcing shattered, and Perseus Black staggered as the thing he had built came apart in his hand. The chamber rang with it. The onyx throne, which had been leaning toward Perseus's forced approach with the wary attention of a lock being picked, recoiled from him all at once, the ember light in the great chair drawing back and away, and for one instant the raven at its crown turned its golden head and looked directly at Perseus Black, and whatever the man saw in that look took the color from his face. The seat had heard the buried no. The seat had heard it, and it knew now exactly what he was, and it would not forget. Ludmilla knelt at Hermione's feet with her hands over her face, saying the word over and over in her own tongue, softer each time, no longer to save herself, but simply because she could, because the saying of it was hers again. And Hermione stayed beside her, one hand on the freed woman's shaking shoulder, and did not look at Perseus at all, which was its own kind of answer. "You," he rounded on Hermione, and for the first time his cold face had come open, and what was under it was not calm. "You showed your hand, you fool. You've shown me exactly how you break it, and there are hours yet till dawn, and I will not bring an unguarded forcing to the reckoning." "I know," Hermione said. She was breathing hard on her feet over the weeping freed woman, and she did not look sorry. "I know exactly what I've spent. I spent it anyway. Because she's a person, Perseus, and you were killing her to open a chair, and I would rather face you armored tomorrow than let you burn a living woman to ash tonight to save my advantage. That's the whole difference between us. You'd have let her die for the seat. I gave up the seat's easiest path to keep her alive, and the awful thing for you," she lifted her chin, "is that the seat was watching, and it just saw both." Perseus Black looked at her and at the freed woman weeping on the stone, and at Harry standing between him and a throne that had defended its heir against his best curse, and he did the coldest, most rational thing, which was the most frightening thing about him. He stopped. "At dawn, then," he said, and his voice had gone flat and quiet and worse than any shout. "The reckoning, lawful, witnessed before the whole house. You have shown me your one weapon, and I will spend the night building the wall you cannot break twice. I will bring a forcing to that chair tomorrow that has no small voice left to find, because I will silence it so deep that not even the seat will hear it. You have been clever tonight, Miss Granger, and merciful, and both will cost you everything, because I am neither, and it is dawn that decides, not the dark." He inclined his head precise even now and turned and walked back up the deep stair into the failing battle above, and the house let him go, because the house had already taken what it wanted from the night, which was the sight of its heirs choosing a stranger's life over an easy victory. The assault broke with his leaving. Above, the cold ones melted back through the drowned door and the mourner's arch and the falconry gate, gathering their wounded, taking their dead, and Blackmore sealed the ways behind them one by one and held, wounded and blazing and unfallen, the first time in 900 years the House of Black had defended its own and won. They came down the deep stair one by one into the throne chamber, and Harry counted them as they came, the way you count the people you love after a fight, and each one that appeared at the foot of the stair put something back in his chest that the night had taken out. Sirius first, cradling the burned arm and grinning through it, who took one look at Harry and Hermione standing whole before a lit throne and said only, "Well, you held the good chair, I see," and then had to turn away for a moment and look at the wall. Andromeda next, ash on her plain dark sleeves and the merwind still in her hair, walking with the straight-backed calm of a woman who had done a hard thing correctly, and behind her Creature, ear-torn, chin high, refusing to have it healed until he had reported. Then Narcissa and Draco, up out of the drowned dark, soaked to the waist, Draco with a gash at his hairline and his mother's hand still resting between his shoulder blades where she had put it in the cellar and had not yet found a reason to take away. For a moment no one made a report at all. They only stood in the ember light and looked at each other, the whole strange, difficult lot of them alive, and the looking said more than any of them would have managed in words. They gathered the family in the throne chamber as the moon went down, because none of them would be parted now, and they saw to the hurts which were real but not mortal. Sirius with a burn down one arm making light of it, Draco pale and soaked from the cistern with a gash at his hairline that Narcissa was binding with a strip of her own sleeve, and a tenderness she had stopped bothering to hide, Andromeda unhurt and terrible, creature with a torn ear he wore like a medal. And Ludmilla black, freed, wrapped in a blanket by the elves, sitting at the foot of the seat and weeping in the slow, exhausted way of a person coming back to a body they had been evicted from, and Hermione knelt with her and did not leave her side. He will do what he said, Ludmilla managed, in her accented English when she could speak. He will silence me deeper, or find another. He does not stop. You must understand this about him. He does not feel the loss of a thing, so he never stops reaching for it. She gripped Hermione's hand. But I will stand at the reckoning, whatever he does to me. If there is a small voice left in me at dawn, you will find it, and I will say the no again, louder in front of the whole house, because you came into the dark of me and found a person where he had made a tool, and I did not know there was anyone left in there to find until you called my name. There's always someone left, Hermione said. That's the thing he'll never understand. It's why he's going to lose. It was Arcturus Black from the great frame at the chamber's height who called them back to the thing that remained undone. Dawn comes in 3 hours, said the arbiter, and you have spent the night at war, and there is one thing yet unfinished, and it must be finished before the witnesses come, or all the rest is for nothing. His painted eyes moved to Harry and Hermione. You have chosen each other. The library witnessed it, and the trials proved it, and tonight the seat watched you spend your advantage to save a stranger, which is the truest conquered I have seen in 900 years of watching false ones. But choosing is not sealing. You came to the conquered in a private room, and that was right, for the choosing is a private thing. The sealing is not. The sealing is a thing the house must witness blood and vow before the seat, so that when you stand at the reckoning you stand not as two who love each other, but as the joined sovereign the old law knows by name. He straightened in his frame. Seal it now, here, before your family, in the hour before dawn, with the house still ringing from defending you. There will never be a fitter time, there will never be fitter witnesses. Creature, light the deep lamps, all of them. The House of Black is about to do the thing it was built for, and has not done since the founders, and I will not have it done in half a light. And Creature, weeping and unashamed, lit the deep lamps of Blackmore, every one, the great chain of them running down from the throne chamber into every corridor and every hall of the waking house. 900 years of darkness answered all at once, so that the whole vast body of Blackmore blazed from its root to its towers, coal gold and singing, a beacon on the black moor that could be seen, the shepherds would say for years after, from 30 miles off. The night the old house on the empty hill lit itself like a risen sun. They sealed the conquered in that light before the onyx throne, with the family gathered close. There was not much to it, and there did not need to be, because the grimoire had been right that the conquered was not a spell but a choosing, and the choosing was already made. They stood before the seat, and each took the other's hand, and each set the small blade the elves brought to their own palm and then pressed the two cuts together, blood to blood over the joined hands, the way Corvus and Lyra had done it in the snow 900 years before, and the coal gold light ran up their joined arms and into them and through them and into the seat, and the deep note swelled into the full twinned chord, and the throne blazed to a brightness the chamber had not held since the founding. And then the vow which the grimoire gave in the founders' own words, and which they said to each other and not to the seat, because that was the whole point of it, that the seat was only ever meant to witness a thing that was really between the two. I take you, Harry said, holding her bleeding hand in his bleeding hand in the blazing light with the family close in the house singing, not to have you and not to keep you and not to make us one, because the founders were wiser than that, and so are you. I take you as two and free and joined. I'll hold the argument with you forever. I'll never once want the argument won. Everything I am is open to you, nothing hidden, for as long as the house stands and after. That's the vow. That's the whole of me. It's yours. I take you, Hermione said, and her voice was steady now, steady as the deep note, because there was nothing left in her that was afraid of this, as two and free and joined. I spent my whole life waiting to be found out, and you're the one thing I never have to hide from, because you already know all of it and you chose it anyway, twice in a library and in the dark. Everything I am is open to you, nothing hidden. I'll hold the argument forever, and I will never ever again believe there's been a mistake, because the mistake would have been any life that wasn't this one. She tightened her hand in his. That's my vow, it's yours, it always was. The family witnessed it, and that was the other half of the right, the half the founders had insisted on, that the sealing be seen, so that the joined pair should never be able to tell themselves afterward that it had not truly happened, that they had dreamed it, that it could be quietly unmade. Sirius stood witness with his burned arm and his wet gray eyes, and did not once make a joke. Andromeda stood witness with her name freshly written back into the northern tapestry 2 floors above. A burned daughter returned to see the house sealed to a burned lion's heir, and the symmetry of it was not lost on her. Narcissa stood witness, cold pride laid down for 1 hour, one gloved hand on her son's shoulder. Draco stood witness, soaked and bleeding and steadier than his whole youth had let him be, watching two people choose each other freely and wholly, which was the thing the forcing had tried to counterfeit and could not, and understanding at last in his bones the size of the difference. Creature stood witness, weeping into a clean pillowcase. And Ludmilla Black, freed, wrapped in her blanket at the foot of the seat, stood witness too, and of them all she perhaps understood it best, because she had just spent 9 days on the wrong side of the exact line the two of them were vowing never to cross, the line between holding another self and taking it. Even the portraits were silent. Even Walburga in her hostile frame in the upper hall had stopped screaming, and no one ever learned whether it was grief or the beginning of shame, and no one much cared. And the onyx throne of Blackmore, witness to the first true concord it had held in 900 years, sounded its deep note through the whole blazing house, and the family wept and did not hide it, and outside on the Blackmore the false dawn grayed toward the true one, toward the equinox, toward the balanced hour and the reckoning, and Perseus Black building his silence in the dark. But that was 3 hours off, and this was now, and for now there was only the light, and the two of them joined in it, and a house that had waited 900 years to be exactly this full. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. The onyx throne, the equinox, came up gray and clean over the moor, and with it came the witnesses, and Blackmore opened its great door to the world for the first time in 900 years. They arrived out of the dawn mist in ones and twos, and then in a slow procession across the heather, and Harry watched them come from the ramparts where he and Hermione had stood the night before. The delegation of the Wisengamot in their plum robes, walking the long way in because the old law forbade any portkey or flue to reach the hall on the day of a reckoning. Kingsley Shacklebolt at their head, minister, and today only a witness, his dark face grave. The small walnut shape of Griselda Marchbank stumping through the wet with a stick she plainly did not need, and here and there among the plum robes the harder faces of Selwyn's block, come to see a resurrected squib line and a half-blood put in their place by the old magic, and not troubling to hide it. And behind the Wisengamot, keeping their own counsel, walking on the black glass road that only they could see, came the goblins, Gornuk, grim and precise, and behind him, borne in a chair of iron carried by 4 of his kind because the high overseer did not walk on the surface of the world for wizards, Ragnarok, come up out of the deep to adjudicate a right that had not been invoked in living memory. They came a long way to watch, Hermione said, which means they think it matters who wins. Good. Let it matter in the open. She was pale but level, and she had dressed for it, not in finery but in the plain dark of a person who meant to be taken seriously, and at her throat on a cord she wore the one ornament she had allowed herself. A small worn silver locket the elves had brought up from a forgotten Blackmore drawer, Marius Black's locket, the one thing the disowned squib had carried out into the Muggle world 4 generations ago, come home at last around the neck of his heir. Whatever the seat decides today, it decides in front of the whole country. No dark rooms, no settled facts presented at dawn. Perseus wanted quiet, and we're giving him a stage with every eye in Britain on it. She reached for Harry's hand. That was always our only real weapon against him, not the law, not the duel, the light. He does his best work where no one's looking, so we make sure everyone's looking. The reckoning was held in the throne chamber, because there was nowhere else it could be held, and the elves of Blackmore had spent the last hour of the night making the impossible room ready to be seen. The witnesses filed down the deep stair in a long murmuring line, and came out into the domed vastness of the heart of Blackmore, and Harry watched hardened Wisengamot elders stop dead at the threshold, watched the breath go out of them at the sight of the groan chamber and its ember light and the onyx throne at its center, and he understood that half the battle for the country's belief had been won before a word was spoken, simply by letting them see the thing the House of Black had hidden for 9 centuries. You could argue with a claim, you could not argue with the heart of a hill. Harry watched the room do its work on them. He watched a lifelong traditionalist, a man who had surely told himself for 40 years that the Blacks were only a rich old family with good taste in cruelty, come to the foot of the deep stair and see the groan chamber and the ember light and understand in his body, before his politics could catch up, that he was standing in the presence of something that did not care what he had told himself. He watched Griselda Marchbank stump to a place near the front and plant her stick and look up at the onyx throne with the frank, hungry delight of a very old scholar being shown, at the very end of her life, a thing she had believed lost. He watched Kingsley, who had seen a great deal, go quiet. And he watched Cassius Selwyn, who had come to see 2 upstarts humbled, arrange his face into confidence and hold it there by will alone, because Selwyn was clever enough to feel the room turning under him and too proud to let it show, and Harry thought, watching him, that the man had made a career of managing rooms and had finally walked into one that could not be managed, only witnessed. Hermione's hand found his in the murmuring dark of the gathering, once a brief press and let go. It was all the reassurance either of them needed, and all they would allow themselves in front of the country. Then the ring closed, and the witnesses stilled, and it began. Ragnar's iron chair was set at the edge of the golden floor, and Gornuk stood at his side with the certified ledger. And when the witnesses had gathered in a great ring around the chamber, plum robes and goblin gray, and the family close behind the two claimants, the high overseer raised one gray hand, and the deep note of the seat sounded once, and the reckoning began. I have adjudicated the accounts of the ancient houses for 400 years, Ragnar said, and his voice moved through the golden floor into every witness's bones so that even Selwyn's block went still. I have never adjudicated this. The reckoning of the onyx throne has not been invoked since before your ministry was founded, and it is not decided by me, nor by your Wisengamot, nor by any law that men can write or bribe or outlive. It is decided by the seat. Two conquered stand before it, each claiming the sovereignty of the House of Black. Each in turn will attempt the seat. The seat will judge, and its judgment is final, and I am here only to witness that judgment cleanly and to speak it into the ledger so that no man may lie about it afterward. His cold eyes moved across the ring of witnesses and lingered one cold moment on Cassius Selwyn. Understand what you have come to see. This is not a vote. This is not a hearing. The old magic does not care what your caste believes about blood. It will show you this morning exactly what it was built to answer to, and some of you will not enjoy the answer, and that is not my concern, and it is not the seat's. Challenger, you invoke the reckoning. You attempt first. Bring your conquered to the seat. Perseus Black stepped forward, and beside him, half a step behind and to the left, came Corvinus. Harry heard Hermione's indrawn breath and understood it. Perseus had done what he said he would do. Ludmilla had been the first forcing, and Ludmilla was freed and stood now among the family as a witness, wrapped in warmth, her hand in Andromeda's. So Perseus had taken the other cousin. Corvinus Black was tall and fair and perhaps 35, and he moved when Perseus moved, and his eyes were open and saw nothing, and the forcing on him was not the forcing Ludmilla had worn. It was deeper. Perseus had spent the night as he promised, silencing the man's will further and further down, wall upon wall upon wall, burying the small voice so far beneath so much stone that Harry, reaching with the new sense the conquered had given him, could not find it at all. Where Ludmilla had been a house with the lights off and someone still inside, Corvinus was a house bricked up, sealed, the windows filled in, and if there was a person left in there, he was buried past any calling. He's buried it too deep, Hermione breathed. Harry, I can't feel him, there's nothing there. He's made it seamless, or so close to seamless that the seat will hear it, Harry said low, though he did not know if it was true. There's always someone left. You told Ludmilla that. You have to believe it now. Perseus brought his forced conquered to the foot of the onyx throne, and he did not gloat, and he did not speechify, because a man about to win does neither, and that was the most frightening thing about him. He simply raised his wand, and Corvinus raised his in flawless mirror, and Perseus Black spoke the old words of claim in a cold, clear voice that carried to every corner of the ring, and offered the seat 2 bloods and 1 will disguised as 2, and reached for the sovereignty of the house. And the onyx throne stirred. Harry felt the chamber go wrong. This was not the warm, tentative waking he and Hermione had woken. This was the seat being worked, being forced, the domination magic reaching into the old working and pressing on it, and the ember light in the great chair flickered and strained, and the deep note bent and soured, and Harry understood with a cold lurch that it might actually happen, that the forcing was good enough and buried deep enough that the seat, hearing no small voice under all that stone, was beginning terribly to read the false conquered as true. The raven at the crown mantled and shuddered. The golden veins in the arms of the throne brightened under Perseus's claim. Around the ring the witnesses swayed, and Selwyn's face had begun very slightly to shape itself toward triumph. It's opening for him, a Wisengamot elder whispered, appalled. God help us, it's opening for him. No, Hermione said. She stepped forward onto the golden floor, and Harry stepped with her, because they did nothing alone anymore, and the whole ring of witnesses turned. High Overseer, Hermione said, and her voice rang clear across the straining chamber. The challenger attempts first, and I do not interrupt his attempt, and I claim no foul. Let the record show it. But the old law of the reckoning grants each conquered the right to bear witness against the other's claim before the seat, and I bear witness now in the light, in front of the whole house, in the Wisengamot, in the deep. The conquered Perseus Black brings to the seat is not 2 wills. It is 1 will and 1 prisoner. He has taken a living man and buried himself beneath a working the founders themselves outlawed, and he offers the seat a lie, and I will prove it is a lie the only way it can be proven, not by argument, which he is better at than I am, but by finding the man he buried and letting him speak. You cannot, Perseus said, without turning, his voice tight now with the effort of the claim. I have buried him past finding. There is no voice to find. Attempt your parlor trick, Miss Granger. It worked once because I was careless once. I am not careless twice. You're right, Hermione said. I can't find him, not alone. You buried him too deep for one person to reach. She turned to Harry and held out her hand, and the cold gold light of the conquered blazed up between their palms. But the whole point of us, Perseus, the thing you've never once understood, the thing that's beaten you at every turn, is that we were never one person. Reaching alone is exactly what a forcing does. Reaching together, freely, nothing hidden, is the one thing your working can never do. It's the opposite of you. And the opposite of you is the only thing in the world that can undo you. She gripped Harry's hand and they reached together. Harry had reached for Hermione in the dark of the second trial, and it had been the two of them finding each other. This was larger. This was the two of them joined, the whole conquered, turning outward as one and reaching down into the bricked-up dark of a buried man, and Harry felt the difference at once. Where Hermione alone had found nothing, the two of them together went deeper, the Concord's light going down through wall after wall of the forcing like a lantern lowered into a well, and it was still not enough. The man was buried too far, and Harry felt Hermione begin to strain, felt the reach falter, and then the family reached with them. He never fully understood how, and afterward the goblins argued about it for a decade, but he thought later that it was the sealing, that the vows they had made before the whole house had bound them not only to each other but into the house itself. And the house was not only stone and gold but the people who had chosen to be its own. He felt Sirius somewhere lending weight, the reckless generous strength of a man who had spent 14 years in a dark he could not climb out of and knew exactly what it was worth to have a hand reach down. He felt Andromeda, who knew grief, reaching toward the buried grief of a stranger with the steady patience of a woman who had learned that you do not haul the drowning up by force, you hold on and let them find you. He felt Narcissa, cold and precise, lending the reach the one thing she had that no one else did, a lifetime's map of exactly how the cruel workings of this family were built, so that she could show them where the walls ran thinnest. And he felt Draco, who knew from the inside what it was to be someone else's hand, reach toward Corvinus with the terrible, specific compassion of a person who had been exactly where the buried man was, and had been reached for once himself, too late to spare him the worst of it but not too late to spare him the rest, and who had sworn in a soaked cellar the night before that if the reaching were ever good for anything, he would give the whole of it. The reach went deeper than Harry had known a reach could go. He lost the chamber, he lost his own edges. There was only the descent, the joined light of the conquered and the family lowered down through wall after wall of Perseus's cruelty, and the walls were many, and the man was so far down, and Harry felt the moment the reach came to the end of its length and the bottom still lay beyond it. He felt Hermione's grip tighten in his. And he did the only thing left, which was to stop trying to reach and start instead simply to trust that a buried man could feel he was not alone even through stone, because that was the one thing the founders had built this house to be, and the one thing Perseus had never once believed. And into that trust at the last came the final voice. He felt Ludmilla Black, freed, step out of Andromeda's arms and onto the golden floor and add her voice to the reaching, because she had worn this forcing, she knew its inside. She knew the shape of the walls because they had been built around her first, and she called into the dark to a man she had known all her life in the cold Vienna halls, called his name in their own tongue, called it the way you call to someone you love across water, Corvinus. Corvinus, we're sinned hirer, we are here, come up. And at the bottom of the well under all the stones something answered. It was small, it was so small. But the conquered had reached it, and the family had reached it, and the freed woman had named it, and the buried man heard at the very bottom of himself that he was not alone, that someone had come down into the dark after him, and the smallest voice in the world said no. The seat heard it. The change ran through the whole grown chamber like a struck bell. The onyx throne, which had been straining open under Perseus's forced claim, stopped. The ember light that had been brightening under his hand went still, and then it turned, the whole vast warmth of the seat turning like a head, listening down through the forcing to the small stubborn no at the bottom of Corvinus Black, and finding it and knowing it for exactly what it was. And the founder's oldest working, the lock built above all else to refuse a will that held another self against its consent, did the one thing it had been made 900 years ago to do. It rejected him. The rejection was not gentle. The seat cast Perseus's claim out of itself all at once, the golden veins in the throne flaring white-hot and then slamming shut against him. And the domination magic he had poured into the seat came back out of it, the way a river comes back when a dam breaks all at once with all its force into the man who had made it. Perseus Black was thrown from his feet. The forcing tore loose from Corvinus in the same instant, and the fair man dropped gasping to the golden floor, his whole self flooding back into him, alive and free and weeping, and Ludmilla ran to him across the light. And Perseus lay where the seat had thrown him, and when he pushed himself up his face had changed because the onyx throne was still looking at him. The raven at its crown turned full upon him, and it was passing its judgment, and the judgment was worse than any curse. Hear the seat, Ragnarok said, and his ancient voice shook, because even the high overseer of the vaults had never seen this. It speaks its judgment into the ledger. Hear it, all of you, and carry it out of this hall, and let no man ever say it was other than this. And the two-voiced stone spoke, the founders' braided voices, and every witness in the ring heard it in their bones. Perseus of the line of Cygnus. You came to the seat of the house with a stolen self in your hand, and you offered us a prisoner and called it a partner, and you asked us to open the whole heart of this house to a single will that would hold others against their consent. This is the one thing we were made to refuse. We were raised in the snow by two who feared exactly you, a black strong enough to take the whole and cold enough to want it. 900 years we have waited in the dark, refusing every single will that came to us certain it deserved the whole, and you are only the latest and the cruelest and the least. We do not kill you. Death is too klein, and you would make a martyr of it, and we are wiser than your vanity. We unmake your claim. From this hour you are no heir of the house of black. The deep will strike your standing. The tapestry will not hold your name. The wards of every black house will know you as no kin. You wanted the whole of the house, and you shall have no part of it, not the smallest, not ever, and you shall live a long time knowing that the thing your family taught you to worship looked at you, at the bottom of the stone, and found you wanting. Go, you are nothing to us now. That is our judgment, and it is done. And the cold gold light withdrew from Perseus Black entirely, so that he knelt alone on the golden floor in a spreading circle of cold gray stone where the warmth of the house would no longer touch him. Cast out unmade, a man who had spent his whole life certain he was owed the world and had just been informed, by 900 years of the old magic in front of the entire country, that he was owed nothing at all. He did not weep. He was too cold for that, and Harry thought that was the worst of it, that even now the man could not feel the size of what he had lost. He rose in the ring of gray dead stone that followed him wherever he stepped, and he looked at Harry and Hermione for a long moment, and there was nothing in his face at all, and then he turned and walked up the deep stair alone through a ring of witnesses who drew back from him, and out of the hall and out of the house and out of the story of the Blacks forever. The chamber was silent behind him, and then into the silence Cassius Selwyn made the last mistake of a long and cautious career. This proves nothing, he said, and his warm old voice had gone thin. A working malfunctioned, a trick was played with sentiment. The committee will need to examine, Cassius, said Griselda Marchbanks in a tone of vast and delighted contempt. Shut up. You brought us all 150 miles to watch the old magic settle the oldest question in Britain, and it settled it in front of the deep and the Wisengamot and God, and you would still stand there and tell us we did not see what we saw. I have known you 60 years, and I have never been so glad to be done with you. She turned her back on him deliberately, and the small movement was a landslide because where Griselda Marchbanks turned, the moderate half of the Wisengamot turned with her, and then more than half, plum robe after plum robe turning its back on Cassius Selwyn, until the man who had whipped a block into a single vote stood in the great chamber with his faction dissolving around him like ash on the moor wind, and no one at all was looking at him. And everyone was looking at the two young people standing hand in hand before the onyx throne. Kingsley Shacklebolt stepped forward from the ring and inclined his head, minister and witness both. The challenger's claim is judged and cast out, he said formally, for the ledger, for the country, for the history that would be written of this morning. The seat has spoken and the deep has recorded it and the ministry has witnessed it, and I will carry the truth of it back to London myself and dare any man to dispute it. His grave face moved at last toward something warmer. There remains one conquered that has not yet attempted the seat. High Overseer, let them make their attempt. Ragnarok looked at Harry and Hermione, and the ancient grey face, which had adjudicated the accounts of the houses for 400 years without warmth, was not without warmth now. Claimants of the House of Black, he said, heirs of the two lines, you have argued your standing in the deep and won it. You have argued it before the Wisengamot and won it. You have held this hall against a siege and saved a stranger from a fate worse than dying and sealed a true conquered before your family in the hour before dawn. He raised one grey hand toward the onyx throne, which stood now quiet and waiting in its ember light, the ring of grey dead stone already warming again, the house closing over the wound of Perseus the way a lake closes over a thrown stone. There is nothing left to argue. There is only the last thing. Go to the seat, the two of you, and do not claim it, and do not command it, and do not do a single one of the proud loud things your family has done in front of it for 900 years. Simply stand before it together and let it look at you, and this time let it finish. Harry looked at Hermione. She looked back at him, and the cold gold light moved warm between their joined hands, and neither of them said anything because there was nothing that needed saying, because they had already said all of it, in a drawing room and a deep library, in the dark of a trial and the light of a ceiling, and the only thing left was to walk the last dozen feet together. They walked to the foot of the onyx throne, hand in hand, and they stopped, and they did not claim it, and they did not command it. They simply stood before it, the two of them, shoulder to shoulder, and let it look at them, and this time it finished. The warmth came up out of the cold stone, but it did not stop where it had stopped before, tentative, a hand reaching to be sure it was not dreaming. It came up whole, it came up certain. The ember light in the arms of the throne kindled to true gold and ran up the high back and gathered at the crown, and the raven of living gold lifted its head and spread its wings for the first time in 900 years, and the fallen crown beneath its feet, which had lain toppled since the founding, which had stirred and half righted itself the first day they came, rose the rest of the way and settled upright and stood. And the deep note that had sounded alone in the dark for 9 centuries swelled into the full twinned chord, the two voices whole, and then the chord grew past anything they had heard, because it was not two voices now, it was the whole house, every vein of gold in every wall of the grown chamber and every corridor of the waking hall singing at once, 900 years of banked and waiting magic coming up all together into the light. And the cold gold glow blazed through the whole vast body of Blackmoor from its root to its towers, so that on the moor outside the witnesses' servants and the shepherds and the whole grey dawn saw the black hall on the empty hill light up like a second sun rising, and the birds went up off the heather for a mile in every direction. The wards woke. Harry felt them go, the whole ancient shield of the house rolling out across the moor and the country beyond, every black house from Grimmauld Place to the drowned door coming alive at once under the hands of 2 sovereigns instead of none. The tapestry woke 2 floors above, and every burned and restored name in it flared bright, Andromeda and Nymphadora and Edward and Marius and Hermione, the whole reborn weave of a family that had spent 9 centuries burning its own and had, this morning, finally, been given back to itself. The elves of Blackmoor lifted their lamps and wept and sang. And the portraits of 900 years of blacks came awake in every frame in the hall, the cold ones and the cruel ones and the proud ones and the kind, and they looked down at the 2 who stood joined before the risen throne, and one by one, ancestor after ancestor, they bowed, and Arcturus Black, the arbiter in his great frame at the chamber's height, bowed lowest and longest of all. "Sit," said Arcturus Black, and his ancient painted voice was thick. "You have earned it 100 times over, and I am tired of watching blacks stand in front of that chair afraid of it. Sit, the 2 of you together, and take up the house, and be the thing the founders raised it to be. Sit down, children, you're home." And Harry Potter and Hermione Granger, heirs of the 2 lines of the House of Black, sat down together upon the onyx throne of Blackmoor, which was broad enough for 2 because it had always only ever been built for 2, and the whole House of Black, awake at last, took them up, and held them, and was, for the first time in 900 years, complete. Harry would try in the years after to describe what it was to be taken up by the seat, and he would never manage it, and he stopped trying, because some things are diminished by the attempt. It was not power or not only, it was belonging made vast. He felt the whole house pour into him and into Hermione at once, and not as a weight but as a homecoming. The wards like a cloak settling on shoulders that had been cold a long time. The vaults and the wealth which he found he cared nothing for, the bond of the elves warm and glad and singing. The wide dark memory of 900 years, the cruel and the kind together, all of it is now to carry and to mend. And running through all of it, steady as the deep note, he felt Hermione, felt her feeling it beside him, the 2 of them holding the enormous thing between them so that neither had to hold it alone, which was the whole design, which was the founder's whole hard-won wisdom, which was the reason the chair was broad enough for 2. He looked at her in the blaze of the risen house on the throne that had waited 9 centuries for exactly them, and she looked at him, and the thing that passed between them needed no words, because it was the same thing the seat had needed, and the family had needed, and the whole house had needed down all the long dark years, not to be alone, never again to be alone. They had given each other that freely in a library and a dark and a dawn, and now a house and a country and 1,000 years of old magic had it too, because 2 people had chosen each other and refused to do it anyway but together. The rest of that day was for the family, and Harry would keep it his whole life the way you keep the few perfect days you are given. The witnesses left in time. Kingsley shook both their hands and told them quietly that the country would take some getting used to 2 sovereigns of an ancient house who had won it by saving a prisoner rather than seizing a throne, and that he thought the getting used to would be very good for the country. Griselda Marchbanks kissed Hermione's cheek and told her to run for the Wisengamot in 10 years so she could watch her do to the whole chamber what she had done to Selwyn. The plum robes filed up the deep stair, murmuring, changed, carrying the truth of the morning back to a Britain that would be a little less sure of its old cruelties by nightfall. Corvinus and Ludmilla Black, freed, stayed, because they had nowhere in the cold north they wished to return to, and every reason to remain in a house that had come down into their darkness after them. And Andromeda had already, without asking anyone, begun to fold them into the family, because that was her particular gift, and no one argued with it, least of all the 2 rescued strangers who had not known such a thing existed. And in the evening, when the great door was barred again and the deep lamps burned warm and low, the family gathered in the throne chamber that was no longer a place of judgment, but only now the warm bright heart of a living house, and they were all there. Sirius with his arm bound and his gray eyes bright, Andromeda with Teddy fetched from home and asleep on her shoulder with his hair gone the deep gold of the risen throne, Narcissa and Draco, Corvinus and Ludmilla, Creature and the whole gray singing host of the Blackmoor elves, and the portraits leaning warm from every frame, and 2 young sovereigns on a chair built for 2. Creature came to them first, before the food, before anything, and he was carrying nothing, which for Creature was itself a ceremony. He stopped before the throne and he looked up at the two of them for a long moment, this ancient creature who had served the cruelty of the house through its worst years and kept faith through its darkest, who had wept at Grimmauld and lit the deep lamps at Blackmoor and held the mourner's arch with a torn ear, and when he spoke his old voice was steady, because he had waited his whole life to say it and would not let it shake. Creature's mother told him the two would come, he said, when Creature was small. She told him the hall would wake and the elves would light the lamps and the house would be a hearth again and not a fortress. Creature did not believe her. Creature lived a long time and saw many cruel things and stopped believing her. His ears trembled once and stilled. Creature's mother was right, the two came. Creature lit the lamps. He bowed, very low, the lowest bow Harry had ever seen him give, and did not rise from it for a long moment. Creature is glad he lived to be wrong. Hermione came down off the throne and knelt in front of him so that they were eye to eye, and she did not thank him with words because words were not the currency between them anymore. She reached out and straightened the crest on his clean pillowcase, the raven and the crown he had stitched himself, and she said only, "You'll light them every year now, at the equinox, for as long as the house stands, that's yours, no one else's, the keeper of the lamps of Blackmoor." And the old elf's face broke open, and he turned away quickly and went to see about the soup, which was the only way he had ever known to carry a feeling too large to hold, and no one stopped him, because the family had learned at last to let its own people love it in their own strange fashions. Across the chamber, Corvinus and Ludmilla Black sat close together near the fire. Freed and Andromeda had put cups of something warm into their hands and a blanket over Ludmilla's shoulders, and the two rescued strangers watched the family's easy warmth with the careful, unbelieving attention of people learning a language late in life. Now and then one of them would say something low to the other in their own tongue, and once Ludmilla laughed, a startled sound as though she had surprised herself by remembering how, and Andromeda, passing, rested a hand briefly on her hair and moved on without comment, and the house folded two more of its lost back into itself, quietly, the way it now did everything. "I have a question," said Draco from the floor where he sat with his back against the base of the throne, which no one had thought to tell him he could not do, and which the throne plainly did not mind. "The motto, Tauger's Pur, always pure, my mother made me embroider it. Your library told you it never meant blood." He looked up at the two of them. "So what does the House of Black say now? Because someone's going to ask, and I would like, for once in my life, to have the right answer to a Black family question ready before the wrong one occurs to me." Harry looked at Hermione, and Hermione looked at Harry, and it was Hermione who answered, because she had found it in the grimoire and had been turning it over for weeks. "It still says Tauger's Pur," she said. "The founder's own words, and we don't get to throw them away just because the family spent 900 years lying about what they meant. But we get to say what they meant. Purity was never about blood. It was about the conquered, about keeping the argument, holding the balance, never letting the house become a single will that holds others against their consent. That's what pure meant, not clean, not closed, true. Always true, always two, always together, always the house that comes down into your dark after you instead of the house that burns you off the wall for being different." She looked around the ring of firelit faces, the burned and the returned and the rescued and the redeemed. "That's the House of Black now, Tauger's Pur, always true. And we keep it not by guarding the blood, but by making sure there's always two hands on the house and never one forever, so it can never again become the thing it was. That's the whole of it. That's what we sat down for." "Tauger's Pur," said Sirius softly and lifted a glass, and this time when he said it there was no bitterness in it at all, only a man watching his family become, at long last, worth the name it had been so cruel about. "Always true, I'll drink to that. God knows I waited long enough for a version of it I could stand to say out loud." They drank to it, all of them, in the warm and blazing heart of Blackmoor, and Teddy slept, and the elves sang low, and the portraits watched their descendants become better than they had been, which is the only kind of forgiveness the dead can be given. Much later, when the family had drifted to their beds and the great house had gone quiet and gold around them, Harry and Hermione stayed, because neither of them was ready to leave the chamber where the whole shape of their lives had settled into place. They sat together on the onyx throne in the low ember light, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her, Marius Black's locket warm at her throat, and the cold gold glow of the conquered moving soft under both their skins. And for a while they said nothing at all, and it was the good kind of nothing, the kind they had been growing toward for 10 years and had finally, fully arrived at. "I keep waiting to be told there's been a mistake," Hermione said at last into the quiet, and Harry felt her mouth curve against his shoulder as she said it, because it was not the old fear anymore. It was the two of them together, keeping the old fear as a joke they got to own now. The girl whose parents run a dental practice in Hampstead, sovereign of the oldest house in Britain, on a throne of living stone, with the person she's loved since she was 15. "Someone's going to come and say I've read the situation wrong. Let them come," Harry said. He turned his head and pressed his mouth to her hair. We'll show them the rock. The rock doesn't lie and doesn't care what anyone thinks, and it grew you a whole line back from ash to put you exactly here, and it took 900 years and it never once gave up, and this morning it sat us down together and finally stopped being lonely." He tightened his arm around her. "You belong here so hard," the house lit up like a sun to say so. "There's no mistake, Hermione, there never was. There was just a very long road to the two of us admitting the thing that was true the whole time." She turned in the ember light on the throne that had waited 900 years for exactly the two of them and looked up at him, and there was nothing hidden in her face at all, nothing held back, the whole of her opened to the whole of him at last. "Nothing hidden," she said softly. "Nothing hidden," he answered, and in the warm gold heart of Blackmore, in the deep quiet of the equinox night, with the whole waking house holding them close and the two great lines of an ancient family joined at last into one bright unbroken weave, the two sovereigns of the House of Black sat together on their grown black throne, hand in hand, home, and the deep note of the seat sounded once more through all the singing stone, not alone, and never ever again alone. Chapter 7 End.